what it takes to be a powerhouse CMO, how Janet Matsuda, Deb Wolf, and Jennifer Johnson purposely designed their careers, and why drinking with three legendary Silicon Valley CMOs is so much fun. All right. Hey ho, let's go. Hello, my legendary friends. I am so stoked to have you with us on this extraordinary episode of Legends and Losers with three of my favorite people on planet Earth. Now, our guest and friend, technology PR legend Sabrina Horn, calls us the podcast Silicon Valley needs. Our good friend and listener from the very beginning, Brian Shaheen, says Legends and Losers is so off, it's on. And our friend, best-selling author of The Miracle Morning and guest, the incredible Hal Elrod, calls us one of the best podcasts of all time. So, if this is your first time with us, what I would tell you is this is probably going to be a different experience for you. We're not a typical interview show; we're a dialogue show, and so sometimes we chase rabbits down zebra holes and the like. And if you've been with us a long time, well, hey, thanks for hanging out. I like hanging out with you. You like hanging out with us. Also, just quickly before we get to our guests, I wanted to share with you something that happened the other day. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. This is the Chinese version. I'll hold it a little bit closer. The Chinese version of Play Bigger, the book that I helped co-author. And so, I don't know about you, but it's not every day that in my life, as a matter of fact, it's never happened before, that a book that I co-authored shows up in its Chinese form. And it's kind of mind-blowing. And there's a whole lot of shit in here that I really, really wonder how they must have translated it. If you read Play Bigger, you know what I'm talking about. All right, anyway, let's get on with today's episode. So, if you heard episode 78 with Tony Chan, the incredible venture capitalist and author of this book I recommend everybody called Good People, one of the things Tony talked about was that we should have affection for the people that we work with. And to say I have affection for these three executives is to put it mildly. All three of us work together. And now this expression that I'm fully embracing, back in the day, love back in the day because it just means a while ago and who the hell knows when. So back in the day, the four of us worked together, and we had an incredible experience at Mercury together. And so, when you're in the trenches with somebody, you really get to know them, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they've seen all of that with me, and I've seen the good and none of the bad or the ugly with any of them. And I could say I fell in love with all three of these incredible marketing leaders. One of them you may know, Jennifer Johnson. She's on episode 45 of Legends and Losers. She's an incredible chief marketing officer and is now the CMO of a security company called Tenable. And then two new CMOs, Deb Wolf and Janet Matsuda. Now, with both Deb and Janet, we could have absolutely done stellar standalone Legends and Losers. And, we may do that as well. But we just thought it would be fun to get the four of us together. The four of us have not sat down since the end of Mercury, which was, approximately 12 years ago. And the ladies were incredible. They decided they would all come to Santa Cruz, to the worldwide studio headquarters of Legends and Losers. And so we shot the show live and in person in Santa Cruz with drinks. Okay, Jennifer Johnson, Chief Marketing Officer at Tenable. She's a category designer and Silicon Valley startup advisor. She's one of the most sought-after marketing leaders in our industry. Prior to that, she was CMO of a red-hot company called Tanium, and prior to that, she was a partner working mostly on marketing at a high-profile, hugely successful venture capital firm, Andreessen Horowitz. And she holds a MBA from Santa Clara University. Deb Wolf is the Chief Marketing Officer of mobile security category leader Lookout, and she's a category designer as well. She's also an advisor to Y Combinator, the startup accelerator, and she's on the Dean's Advisory Council at the California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo. She's a multi-time chief marketing officer. She was at PeopleSoft back in the day, and she was the first marketing executive at Workday. She was one of the very first people there. I can't remember what number, maybe she tells us, but very early. And Workday today is a $21 billion market cap category king. And then Janet Matsuda, the incredible Janet Matsuda, she has a Harvard MBA. I don't hold that against her, though. She's a multi-time CMO as well, general manager, category designer, and she actually comes from a science and engineering background. Today, she is a senior vice president of product marketing at $13 billion market cap company, category king in Silicon Valley, Palo Alto Networks. And prior to that, she was the chief marketing officer at Nimble Storage, a Sequoia-backed company who was acquired by Hewlett-Packard for $1 billion. Prior to that, she was the CMO of Blue Coat, a security technology company, who ultimately was acquired by Symantec for $4 billion. So when I say these are powerhouse CMOs, I'm not kidding. These are the powerhouses right here. And here they are, Janet Matsuda, Deb Wolf, and Jennifer Johnson on Legends and Losers. So, Deborah.
Yes, Chris. Hello.
Jennifer Johnson.
Hello.
Janet Matsuda. How great to be sitting down with beers and wine and scotch with you guys.
It's perfect.
I'm stoked. How are you?
Good. I'm real good.
Doing well.
Now, JJ, you had a pretty exciting experience recently, didn't you?
I did. Luckily, I made it back from Miami. So we decided to do our executive retreat, our strategery session in Miami as a hurricane was coming in, which that we actually are a really good company. We do make good decisions most of the time. Yes. But, in all seriousness, I luckily got out last night on a plane, probably one of the last flights out of Miami, and I am very concerned. And my thoughts and prayers go out to the people of Miami and Florida right now, because I think they're about to get something pretty nasty coming their way.
Well, and have you guys spent much time in the Caribbean?
A little bit, not a lot.
Yeah, I've been to St. Martin and Barbados and a bunch of those islands, and diving in Jamaica, and holy shit, it's terrifying.
That infrastructure is not built for storms like that at all.
American infrastructure, we're, learning not so much.
Right. Well, they were saying, I was telling you guys earlier, the guy at the hotel was saying that, a normal rainstorm for a few hours in Miami will flood South Beach entirely. The streets will be flooded. Now, can you only imagine? And hopefully when this comes out, we'll hopefully fingers crossed, seeing that it wasn't as bad. But, anyway, it's very, very scary. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to sleep in my own bed last night. So, yes.
Yes, well, we're glad you're here safe.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I think the best part of your story you were telling us was the dogs and animals coming out on the plane with you.
Yeah, it was kind of like a zoo, literally and figuratively, in the airport and on the plane yesterday. So in the row behind me, there were 4 dogs that 2 and 2, kind of like Noah's Ark, right? And they started growling at each other, and one person put the wee pad out in the aisle in case the dog needed to relieve themselves. One dog came up from coach into the front and found its way up almost in the cockpit, and the flight attendant had to retrieve the dog and call over the loudspeaker. Who had the black and white Pomeranian needed to come up and retrieve their animal. But it was an eventful flight, in I guess the good way that you want an eventful flight.
Have you ever been on a plane before where the flight attendant gets on the PA system and says, with the owner of a Pomeranian, please come to the front of the plane?
That has not happened to me.
I've been on a lot of flights. That's a new one.
Hopefully that's the worst kind of eventful flight that I will have sometime in my life. We all fly a lot. Have you guys had any, what's the craziest flying story?
Well, I used to always go see my parents on the end of a business trip. And so it was a little flight from Chicago to Iowa, right? And
one of those take a chance airline connector things?
Yeah, it's just the really small airplane. And I remember it was the worst flight I'd ever been on because you're up and down and up and down. And it was just, there was no service on that flight for sure. But yeah, when we landed, we found out we were the last flight out of Chicago and there was like a tornado in the neighborhood. Like just glad to be on the ground. But those little planes, they can, they move up and down a lot when the weather's like that.
Way wobbly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be very focusing.
Are any of you afraid to fly? We have to fly a
I'm
lot.
not afraid to fly. No, you have to be on, I mean, with what we do, we're on planes all the time. No. Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
There's an emotional factor, but certainly statistically, it's probably a lot safer than getting on 101 in a car, right?
For sure.
So you have to keep it perspective.
Or even BART. Sometimes my BART commute scares me more than getting on a plane, I gotta say. Like, I don't want to get on this BART train this morning. You got like shitty pants guy in the corner, so I don't need that.
Not so much on shitty pants guy.
No animals, but it's debatable about what you might see. It's true.
I've been on so many, but one of my favorites was landing at Heathrow, and we are way into the descent. Like, I don't know how many, but if you'd told me we were 800 feet from the ground, that wouldn't be a surprise. And all of a sudden, rapidly, boom, change course and bank left.
Yeah, I've had one of those in San Francisco. Yeah. Where it's like, whoop, back up. Yeah.
Yeah, and the pilot comes on and says, we were about to land, and there was a fucking plane on the runway, and I decided not to. And in my case, I'd be curious in yours, the pilot said, listen, I had been cleared. Just so you know, I was cleared on this runway, and then I saw the other plane. And now I'm going to have a conversation with air traffic control at Heathrow. Is that what happened to you?
Same thing. We came in, at San Francisco, you're coming in over the water, right? And either he could see it or it was coming up the runway, or I don't know what happened, but basically we came in and we went straight back up again. I'm like, okay.
Did you read about that? There was like a near collision like a month ago.
Yeah.
It was
in
like
San Francisco.
in San Francisco. Yeah. And they because they went on where the planes were taxiing. They thought that was the runway.
Yeah.
And they almost, thank goodness but if you think about it, they would have, that would have been the like worst aviation disaster in history.
Well, and I have a very close friend, my buddy Elliot, who was on that Korean air flight at SFO. Remember a few years ago?
Yeah, of course.
Where they came in too low and smashed the plane?
Yeah.
He and a number of friends and colleagues are martial artists, and they train in a Korean martial art, and they were coming back from a martial arts competition in Korea.
Wow.
And it was very, very upsetting. A lot of people have PTSD from it.
Oh, I'm sure.
There was at least one woman who died on the tarmac.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They ran over.
Mm-hmm.
No thanks.
I have to get on a plane on Monday, so
we should stop talking about this. All right. So what does it take to be a legendary CMO, ladies? You're three of the most legendary CMOs in the world.
That's a great segue from plane crashes to being a CMO, which is probably a parallel somewhere
it's just a pivot.
You should probably go to air traffic school to be a CMO, right? You should stand up in the tower and figure out where all the planes are going.
Actually, the one thing about planes, I never understand why anybody who gets upset on planes and nervous about on planes. Because I remember early on in my flying life, I was on a plane and there was some technical mechanical problem, and the flight got delayed, and 45 minutes later they come on and say, okay, we're going to go. And there's this woman two rows ahead of me, and she goes into a full-on panic attack about this, and she's afraid the plane's going to blow up or whatever she's afraid of, right? And the flight attendant comes over and is trying to calm her down, and she's not coming down. And finally the flight attendant kind of grabs her by the arms and says, ma'am, there's only one person on planet Earth who decides whether or not it's safe for us to fly, and he's on the plane too. And I always thought that's the ultimate governance model, right?
Right.
Like that really works. I don't know about you, but with all this like driverless car bullshit and stuff, I'm not getting on the driverless fucking plane. Because when some kid who grew up on video games is deciding whether or not we take off, and he's in a bunker in Kuala Lumpur Ding Dong somewhere, no way. I want the person who decides on the plane with us.
Yes. Okay. So how far out do you think we realistically are from actually having autonomous vehicles as the norm on our streets?
I'm afraid to think about it, really. I'm seriously, and what streets, right? Like the streets of San Francisco where cars are already crashing into each other all the time?
Yeah.
I don't know.
See, my theory is it'll be a lot safer when everyone has that assisted driving stuff going on.
Yeah.
But it'll take for a long time because you look at how many old cars just went smog and all that
Well,
stuff.
and there's
a lot
people
of
like Chris
cars
that aren't getting in those cars, so.
Well,
I mean, I'm not sure he's still going to be on his bike or something.
but I think it's going to be, human error. There may be a lot of people who think they're great drivers.
Yeah.
But, human error is a huge factor in distracted driving. I think the roads will be safer, actually, once that happens.
Yeah. It will take a while, but.
Well, here's how we can make the road safer right now. Nobody's allowed to drive slow in the left-hand lane anymore. And that goes triple for fucking Prius drivers. I don't know what it is about the drivers of the Prii, but it's often a Prii driver with 15 cars in the left-hand lane behind them, and you got to stick handle around and do all this stuff, and you get to them, and there's this fucking, I'll just say person in the Prii.
How slow is too slow in the fast lane?
How slow is slower than anybody behind you.
Okay.
Or next to you, in the lane right next to you, that's going around you.
Yeah, that's right. If there's somebody behind, look, it's European driving, right? Germany, Portugal, Italy, you do any of that shit there, you're finished. So I don't care what the law says on the speed limit, but if there's somebody behind you and you're in the left-hand lane, you need to get the fuck out of that lane. And by the way, when I'm governor of California, my first executive order is there'll be a new law about that. And if you get caught doing that, it's an immediate $25,000 fine and 6 months in jail next to an axe murder.
It's on the same par as an axe murderer in your mind.
No,
it's
but
worse.
I'm a big fan of deterrence. So if 25 grand and an axe murderer won't get you out of the left-hand lane, I don't know what will. Maybe you and I need a little time together in a room for about 3 seconds. No, people don't drive with any fucking intention. You know that?
That's true.
They meander.
What kind of intention are you supposed to have?
The intention to get somewhere. And ideally with a little bit of style. Although you guys probably haven't driven much around Santa Cruz, right?
The drive-in, you described the drive-in this morning, I gotta say. There were a lot of slow little Prii.
On the highway.
On the highway, yeah.
Yeah, but see, once you get to Santa Cruz, when you crossed over into Santa Cruz, did the mayor give you a bag of weed?
I missed that intersection.
You missed that? You must have come in on the wrong road. But I'll tell you, this town is not a good town to be in a hurry.
Yeah. Because
the speed limit's about 25 in most of Santa Cruz, but it's really kind of 15, and 75% of the drivers are stoned at all times. And so you have to go just chill your nuts right out.
How does that work for you?
Yeah.
I mean, you like to live here, but do you like to drive here?
Well, so what I found is a new switch in my head. There's the Santa Cruz switch, and then there's the highway switch. And the Santa Cruz switch, I literally, all kidding aside, I listen to different music when I drive in Santa Cruz. I like to listen to very mellow, happy reggae. And normally I listen to hard rock and punk rock. And that I find chills my nuts right out. And, and the other thing that happens in Santa Cruz is we get these random skateboarders wearing black hoodies in the middle of the street at 10 o'clock at night, and just people not paying attention, and just, it's the land of freaks and geeks, or whatever the fuck, surfers and stoners.
You know what I noticed on the drive down here? You know how they have those signs on the freeway with little messages like, there's going to be an event at the stadium or whatever. All the signs right now are watch for people walking on the roadway. I don't know what happened, but apparently there are people walking on the freeways now that you got to watch out for.
What the fuck are they doing walking on the freeway?
They must be stoned.
Yeah, no intention.
Definitely walking with no intention. See, when I want to walk around with no intention, I walk along the beach. And I'm like, oh, look how pretty it is.
You know what cars need? You know how like the police cars have like the like loudspeaker thing that when they're pulling someone over, they can like yell at the car and it's really loud. Every car needs that, but with your voice pre-programmed. And then you can just press a button. It can be like, get the fuck off the road. You don't have intention, right? Sorry, am I allowed to say that? So I have to tell you, by the way, the last time I was on your podcast, my mother called me afterward and she said, you were very, very good, but you used the F word a lot. So she told me that I was not allowed to drop the F-bomb. So I'm going to do it like 3 times on this segment. So I apologize for all of you that might have been offended by my last podcast.
Yeah, you were very offensive. Anybody who was offended by JJ on Legends and Losers can go fuck themselves. That's what I think. Actually, I got to tell you, I was speaking of marketing and CMOing. I was very concerned for quite a while that we, Legends and Losers, had not had a negative review yet. We literally had all 5-star reviews, which is great. But
were you worried people were kissing your ass or what?
Well, no, I like my ass to be kissed, but don't we all? But legendary brands attract people and repel people. So I'm like, where are all the people we're repelling? Maybe we're not, a good brand. And so we got our first negative review.
Don't tell me it was on my podcast.
It said, Jennifer Johnson, you guys said she was like the model of the new CMO, and that chick swears like a truck driver and is fucking retarded. No, it wasn't. It was a listener who had heard me on another podcast called The Zig Ziglar Show, The Ziglar Show. And I'm a huge Zig Ziglar fan. He taught me to sell, and it was a huge honor and thrill. And they're a much more conservative audience. Zig was a conservative guy. They don't swear on the show. I was a good boy, as hard as it is for me. So, a bunch of people who heard me on that show clearly came over and checked out Legends and Losers. And this person felt compelled to say that I swore like a child who just learned the F word or something like that, which I completely agree with. And that it was terrible how much interrupting that I did. And especially I had whatever episode this person listened to was with some friend of mine, maybe you. And so I interrupt too much and I swear too much. And I completely agree. I do both of those things and I don't really give a fuck.
Well, that's good. So I listened to your podcast with Michelle Feaster, another Mercury alumni.
Right.
And you said it a few times, but it was like interruption with intention. It wasn't rude because you prefaced it by saying, I'm going to interrupt you, but you were trying to get something out of her and you were trying to get this because it was such a good story. So it's interruption. It's polite interruption, right? Is that a thing? Can we make that a thing?
Here's the thing. And actually I've started to explain it to people a little bit more. So most podcasts are interview shows. And I think most podcasters don't even think about what format they're going to use. They're going to do interviews because that's what people do. Well, we're not a fucking interview show. I'm not Barbara Wawa, right? We're having conversations. And in normal conversations, we interrupt each other, right? And you go, oh, that reminds me of the time, or your brother, right? That's how people interact.
Yeah.
So we're what's called a dialogue show. And I'm not Barbara Walters or any of that shit. And we're going to drink beers and scotch and have a conversation. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's good.
So tell me about legendary marketing, Deborah.
What do you want to know, Chris? You have to learn from the best not to kiss your ass, but you do. We all learned from you. We all got to be part of it.
I learned more from you guys than you learned from me, just so you know.
I don't know about that.
But I think it's the environment, right?
For
so
sure.
the thing, if you think about how many great people came from Mercury and ended up having wonderful careers in marketing.
How many CMOs? Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's all good.
Hey, no interrupting on the show.
It was with intention.
And respect.
How many CMO people do you have that are like your little network that you raised up? A lot.
I haven't counted. I would guess CMOs out of Mercury probably would be in the neighborhood of 20. Does that sound about right?
During that
not
time?
everybody's a CMO. Like you look at Jonathan Rendy or, like different titles, but very successful.
Well, if you said
executive.
Yeah,
if you
exactly.
said C-level executives out of Mercury,
Yeah.
I mean, it would be
Crazy.
Oh, it would have to be 50.
Do you think it's that? I mean, I know there's a
Yeah.
lot. Do you think it's that high?
Oh shit!
I
just
would
got.
say so.
I
I
think
bet
so.
you we could count them on our hands. Yeah.
I just got an email from Savan Metzger the other day. He's CEO of some new hot sounding awesome thing. Not that. Oh, and if Savan could be a CEO, anyone can. No, I don't mean it that way at all. A talented
There's
guy,
your
but
second negative review.
yeah. No. Sorry, Savan. The good news is he's really handsome, and I think he can kill me. So
So is it nature or nurture? Is it the fact that talented people were attracted to go to Mercury because other talented people were there and they were destined to become C-level executives, or was it because we all got really good training there and we learned through osmosis? What do you think it is?
I think that you have to have something to work with, right? But there are a lot of really talented people that don't get the opportunities. And I think being in that environment, you learn so much. I mean, yeah, we all learn from Chris or Sue, but we all learn from each other, right? It's that synergy, and you learn also how to be part of a team. And I think that's a big part of it. It's like the way the team interacted. It wasn't even skills. It was like that, how do you interact together to get the best out of people?
That's right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I'm a mom of adopted kids, as you know, so I'm a nurture and nature person. I believe that they come with a bunch of shit you got to figure out and see if you can work with, but you will have a whole big blank slate you can kind of form and fix and, make it your own. And I mean, at that time, and I wasn't even at Mercury that long. I was there like 2 years, right? But that period of time, so much happened in the company. I mean, we had massive brand change. Exactly. Massive brand change. Like for you to manage through that and to keep that team together and for that team to actually work together and not have a bunch of infighting. It's pretty amazing. And I have people on my team now at Lookout that were at our team at Mercury. I mean, Danny McKeever's with me. Aldo Bermudez is with me. I mean, these people have followed me from, company to company, which is, but it's awesome for them, right? On your part too. But it's awesome for them. I mean, and I'm not stupid. I mean, those are my people, right? That's who I want with me.
Yeah.
And hopefully they see the same level of success, in their future careers as well.
Yeah. I think look, there's smart people everywhere, right? And so I think there's a lot of stupid people everywhere too. You don't let me finish my thought. That was the next thing.
No intention in that interruption.
Way intention in that. Let's talk about the free eye assholes again.
But I do think that, and so I work now for a company that's a software company, not based in Silicon Valley, right? So it's some of the most talented, wonderful team that I've ever worked with. An executive team, lights out, amazing. None of them are Silicon Valley based though, right? So you think about not saying that they're not, like, Silicon Valley is not better, right? There's smart people everywhere, but I do think that there's something.
No, there's only smart people in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, there are, and a lot of dumb ones. No, but I do think that you get something by, there's something to be said for that Silicon Valley DNA, the companies you work in, the experiences you've had, the things you've seen, right? It shapes you, and it gives you, quite frankly, a leg up because it gives you better training, right? That's what I think. So I think it's probably a little bit in nature, but probably more nurture is my point of view.
The thing I find interesting, just sort of sitting here with the three of you guys today, is we were all together at the same time on the same team.
Yeah.
And I think about that now, and I go, if this was a startup, and this was the 4-person founding marketing team in a startup, with all due modesty, the 4 of us would wreak havoc on the planet. And we had a lot of other legendary people on that team. And so I guess my point is, when I look back on it, I just go, wow, we had murderers row in that company.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of loud music coming from your office, too. Always at 11.
So tell me about that.
I will tell you, the one thing that I think I learned more than anything else from you that I still today take is how to evaluate good copy and verbal brand. And it took me because you were a pain in the ass, let me tell you.
I was a big pain in your ass for a while, wasn't I?
Yes. And my poor writer's asses. But But I finally got it when I realized that for you, copy is like music, which it clicked. I was like, oh, he's a musician. It has to have a certain rhythm to it. And and no verbose words, just say what you want to say. And as soon as you do that, and that's so important, it's so overlooked in the world of, I think, digital and, much more visual branding, but it's so, so important. And especially when you're in a young company or an up and coming company that you're trying to figure out how to say your messaging, how clear to say it, how simple to say it, easy to say it in a lot of words, hard to say in a few words. And that, I think, is the thing I took the most from you. I want to hug you.
Oh.
I do.
Aw.
Seriously, and I remember sitting in your office, usually, scotch, music blaring, and still, like, that was the thing. I'm like, oh, it's a melody. It's a tempo. I get it now.
He's writing a song in his head. Yeah. And actually, what's going on for me in those moments, and this is going to sound really crazy, I'm not writing it. I ask in my head, what does it want? Right? There's that old expression or that old story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a great story that when they asked Michelangelo how he created the sculpture David, he said, you've heard me say this, right? All I did was remove everything that's David or that wasn't David. And so just like with music, it's not so much what do I want to say? It's what's this communication trying to say, and how do we remove everything that's not David? And when something's on the page that's not David, it makes me angry.
So can you teach that? I mean, really, or is that is that your gift?
It's probably a curse. No, I think you can. I mean, you have it.
I think the way I learned it, and I wasn't the one writing it, by the way. So I was always, usually with a copywriter, usually someone that was, back then it was like annual reports and brochures. We printed stuff, right? None of that stuff exists anymore. But that was that or print copy where you have a super small amount of space. And like I said, once I understood what he just said around remove the stuff that's clouding it up, that's the crap stuff around it, just take that out and get it as simple as you can. I think, can you teach it? I didn't have to write it, but our writers, Bob Hansen got there for sure.
Way got there.
And is still really, he worked for us at Workday. He was still one of the best at simplifying that kind of thing. I think once you understood that, if you had the gift of writing, then you could simplify it down.
Yeah. I think simplicity is definitely an art form, right? It's easy to just throw up verbal diarrhea on a page, and then you get there, as marketers, we know how annoying the marketing jargon, right? And so when I was at Tanium, we actually had a list of the banned words. So even things like next generation, anything that sounded like everyone else, right? And it's kind of hard sometimes in security, because I think security is plagued with this more even than other industries within technology. But that's where the art comes, is to actually get something that's so easy to understand that anyone can understand it, but doesn't sound like everyone else. But when you can do that, it's magic, right?
It is funny for our industry too. We all work in B2B, right? We've worked in B2B our whole career. And for some reason, people think when you work in B2B, the stuff has to be really shitty. Mm-hmm. I don't understand that. Mm-hmm. It's true. The company I'm at now, I remember, because we've done a pivot, right? We were a consumer company going to the enterprise. And at the time when the CEO was trying to get, which, when I joined the company, I sort of assumed that everybody was on that train, and they got that was a really good thing. There's money over there, go there. Not the case for a relatively young company with, very consumer driven people. And I remember at one of the first all hands where we were talking about what that looked like and what kind of, new people we needed, somebody raised their hand. Unfortunately, he was in recruiting. And he said, well, how am I going to recruit designers to do B2B work? Everybody knows it's really shitty. We were like, and I come from Workday, where, by the way,
head of recruiting. That's
exactly. I'm like, he needs to leave the company. But here, I came from Workday, where UX was the focus, the big focus of taking the consumer driven UX into the enterprise. And I thought, why do you think B2B people, all of us, the same people driving our Prius and looking at the Apple ads, want shitty UX for B2B software? Like, why?
Yeah.
But it's just this, so I think that, I don't know where I got from that point, but
yeah, no, I get it. So I mean, you were really a transformation agent more than probably anything that you did. And like, that's hard.
The pivot
Kudos
thing
to
is
you.
hard.
Yeah.
The pivot, I had no idea how hard it was as a company, and there's lots of companies doing it, right? Dropbox, Google's doing it. Like, it's hard. It's hard. It's a mental shift. It's a company shift. It's a DNA shift. It's a people shift. It's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then to do it well, right? To still have that clear, usable, everything that you want out of consumer interface.
So Janet,
Yes,
tell us about your
Christopher.
life as a CMO.
I don't really think that I set out to be a CMO. I came up through product management, through product marketing. I had a GM role, and my husband's like, don't go be a CMO. That you're too technical to be a CMO.
You have an engineering degree, don't you?
I have a CS background.
Yeah.
But I think the CMOs today, there are a lot more people like me than there used to be in CMO roles. Like, it's valued more, right?
Yep.
Being able to understand the product is valued more. So I feel like I'm the new kind of CMO. So it's good.
Okay, so what is the new kind of CMO, Miss New CMO? Or I should say Ms. New CMO.
Well, I feel like there's a lot more analytics.
Yeah.
Right. So people like me that are kind of, not used to be, you had to be super creative and the big idea person that, big ad campaign. That was the thing.
Easy.
That was the thing.
You used to be that person. Okay.
No. I mean, that used to be the model for CMO. But I think now when you talk to people who are recruiting, they kind of explicitly say, we either want this kind of CMO or we want that kind of CMO or we want somebody that has some combo. Right. But there's a recognition that that's not the only model. Right. And, I think that's nice. There's room for people like me. They're kind of analytical.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I think that's true that a lot of companies, they sort of want the big strategic, communication, creative type CMO. But you are in a lot of ways the corollary or the opposite of that. You are the.
I'd like to think I'm strategic, but yes, I'm not creative in that way. I'm the not strategic CMO.
My flexibility is normally not good enough to get both feet in my fuck mouth, but let me try. No, but in all seriousness, you're more of an introvert, fair?
Yeah.
You're more analytical.
I'm more analytical for sure than like you and I, are very we work together really well.
Right.
Because, we're like the two sides of the brain.
And so, I don't know what it's like to be you. So what's it like when you're the more analytical, detail-oriented, CS background, data-oriented CMO as opposed to the more, let's say we're both equally strategic, but less creative or extroverted, introverted, so, all that.
I think it's interesting because although I am analytical, I'm kind of like, when you do those things, like I'm kind of on the fence where sometimes I make decisions through intuition and I think that if you're going to be in marketing, you have to be able to go from one side to the other. You have to be able to look at the data. You can't ignore the data anymore. There's so much data. You have to look at that, but then you also have to be able to step back and say, okay, what feels right? What's going to catch people? What's that emotional hook that's going to connect with them? And I think you have to be on both sides of it, no matter what kind of CMO you are, right? But like I said, like if you look back 10 years ago, there were very few people like me, in the CMO role. And I think now, especially in tech, there's a little bit more of a desire for that, which is, it's good, it makes the job.
Yeah, more technical CMO for sure. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm a product marketing born CMO. There you go. Right. You've got two. What is your background? What's your background?
More brand,
right? So I think what we're saying, right, is
notice we're sitting on the same side of the table.
But I had to switch because when you go, I think it's also what stage is the company in?
Exactly.
Right. I mean, if you're at a startup stage, you got to nail a few of the things on messaging and where you're going there, but then you got to build demand as fast as you can.
Yep.
And that's usually analytical based, what's working, what's not. And if, you got to feed people, right? You got salespeople that have to build territories. And so I switched mid-career. I mean, actually up until the point I was at Mercury, and then I really going to Workday as employee 60, like you
were the first marketing executive there.
There were a couple of folks doing some contract work there, but that was it was us. It was me and 2 contractors at the time. And you had to learn demand, and you had to look at the data, and you had to learn analytics, and all of that was so, the other side of my brain, which now I think I do more of that. But again, I'm at a early stage company, right? So it kind of depends on where you are in the, in the evolution of the company.
Yeah,
too.
I totally agree. I mean, that's why our jobs are so hard, right? It's because we have to be creative and big picture thinking and analytical and in the data, and be the B2B world. We have to be technical, but we still have to understand demand gen and
you got to be a great evangelist
and a great evangelist and a category designer and all these things, right? And so we talked about this last time when I was on the podcast. Is I think that the product market, I think great CMOs come from all backgrounds, right? I think there is the reason probably 2 of the 4 of us now are coming from a product background is like category design is a great driver of that, because the notion of positioning and point of view, and we talked about this last time, right? Is it's a product marketing skill set that as product marketers you have inherently. Sure. You're a positioner by nature. You have to have a point of view because that's how you form your product strategy and your product marketing strategy. So it's a very natural blend into, I think, where things are moving with being able to actually design categories too.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I think what's going on is, to your point, the range of skills the CMO needs is much broader today, right? You can't just be the creative CMO or the analytical, more operational CMO, or however you want to think about it. You got to have all of that stuff in between. And then there's all these new skills. Like I'm very curious to ask you guys what you think about growth hacking in particular, right? Because I'm starting to work with a 27-year-old growth hacker, and there's some very cool shit you learn when you get into it with a 27-year-old growth hacker. And so there's all these new black arts that are the digital black arts that are emerging, right? And interestingly enough, on that front, Google makes one change to their algorithm, particularly for a startup company, and that impacts where you show up in searches. And for a company that's scratching to make its quarters, that can crush the business. And so having people who really get that whole world, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's critical.
So how do you think about your priorities?
I mean, we have to dual microphones. From my standpoint, you've got to start with the messaging. Like you have to start with what's the category? What problem are you solving? Like you've got to start with that, because digital doesn't work, PR doesn't work, none of that stuff works unless you have something interesting to say. Mm-hmm. So that's where you got to start.
So you start with category design.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there was a period of time where, technology could buy you a lot. When you were a company sort of putting in new infrastructure, marketing automation, a bunch of different things that would move you ahead, significantly move you ahead, you could use that technology in a way that would get a difference between your company, but it always comes back to the message. Always. Yep. Now, and by the way, now everybody has that technology infrastructure. So that world, if you don't have that in place, I'm not even sure how you're operating. Right. But you've got to move beyond that. So that's like table stakes now. So you're back to messaging, right? You're back to category design. You're back to how are you going to stand out from the rest of the competition?
It's exactly what it is, right? And I totally agree with both of you. And I think like the focusing on the problem. So I do, when you talk about this a lot too, as through category design, like if you don't get crisp on the problem you're solving, nothing else matters, because it's amazing how many marketers still go straight to the solution and straight to here's how we're like so great, right? And like people don't spend enough time. This is like the one thing I always harp on people is like you have to be crisp on the problem, and it's really hard to do, which is probably why people don't like spend enough time there, right? But you have to, and your positioning in your category, it will help drive everything. It helps you define your priorities. Like where should you be focusing your marketing investment? Where should you be building your people? What kind of company do you want to be? Like it drives everything.
Well, and I've come to a place where I truly believe, I know it sounds like a convenient soundbite, and it is, but I believe it in my bones. The biggest problem in business today is too many solutions without a problem.
Yes. Yes, it's so true.
And entrepreneurs and innovators, they want to talk about carboningulation. And I just find myself saying over and over again, listen, just because you build drills doesn't mean anyone gives a fuck about drills. They buy holes, not drills.
But you know what that actually means is that we have a lack of storytelling capability, because someone created that drill because they saw a problem. They didn't just say, like, I'm going to go drill a hole in the wall. They had intention, right? They had intention, but they saw a problem.
Unlike those assholes in the left-hand lane.
Yes, but they saw a problem. It's just they can't articulate it, which is why you need marketing. One of the many reasons, but
well, and I think a lot of times it's not the founder who's articulating, and so you get away from it, right? You get away from the problem, and what people know is the solution. They went and they learned what the product does, and what they do is they explain what the product does, and then they force the person they're explaining to figure out the problem that they might have that this might solve, and that's a lot of work. I mean, marketing is all about how to make it easy to understand why you care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something? No. You,
Blah, blah, blah.
blah, blah. You blah, blah.
I was just going to agree.
So let's also maybe talk about the role of the CMO. The thing that I find interesting about the three of you and other what I would consider modern CMOs is if you roll the clock back not that many years ago, even 5 years ago, if you consumed any of the CMO porno mag stuff, a lot of what I heard was, wah, 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 how come we don't have a seat at the table? How come we're not strategic? How to get into the boardroom and really matter? Rah, rah, rah. It was like all this, we sit at the kids' table because we're not real executives and we want to be real executives, and how do we do that? Rah, rah, rah. All this whiny bullshit in the CMO world. And I used to read that stuff and go, the reason you don't have a seat at the table is you're a whiny, snot, bullshit executive. But I digress. Wow. You three are the opposite of that. So I guess share some insights around, the role of marketing in the company and sort of the seat at the table that the CMO has today.
Well, I would say that I'd say it's changing, but it's all a matter of how you position yourself. Marketing can be the most strategic company moving function in the company. As probably is the case of you, I'm assuming, have been very instrumental in your company's ability to pivot from consumer to enterprise. It's a huge feat. So, kudos to you. You've had an amazing career as well. Like we're able to, not only from the skill that we have, but just us as leaders have been able to actually help move a company. Or you can be the person that says, I'm going to give the salesperson all the leads. And I'm not saying that that's not important, because obviously you have to do that, but it's about what you choose to make your role. And at least from my perspective, it's also the environment that you're in, right? So part of this is like being a CMO that's in the right fit, because there still are executive teams and CEOs out there that don't believe in marketing. And there's only so much you can do to change the mindset of someone who is very clear on what they think marketing is and isn't. So I think it's about how you position yourself, but I think it's also about the company and the CEO that you choose to work with.
Yeah, I think name me another C-level role in the organization that touches every other part of the business. There isn't one.
Well, maybe finance with planning, budgeting.
Maybe.
But not strategically like this.
No, I guess maybe touches the inside and outside of the business would be the better way to say it. But everything from, I think about the work that I do with the HR team from an employee brand standpoint, right? And just sort of that evangelism and cheerleading inside the company all the way through product and strategy and sales and finance.
Do you have internal comms?
We do, yeah. But
do you own it, or does HR own it?
We own it.
Do you own it?
Actually, I'll say it's a collaboration between us.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes, it's a right now at Tenable. It's a collaboration between HR and marketing.
But can HR send out a communication without going through you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have a point of view on that?
I do.
It's
I have a
usually
really
about,
strong one.
like benefits or something.
Yeah.
No, it's
What is
not
your point
really
of view about?
Yeah, I don't know that marketing needs to edit the benefits,
Exactly.
update, webinar,
Right.
intranet, wah wah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I recently talked to Bruce Cleveland about this. He was the founding CMO at Siebel. He was one of the first 50 employees at Oracle. And now he's an incredibly successful venture capitalist. And he said, marketing's got to own internal comms. And it's the same thing with investor relations, right? And particularly investor communications. At Mercury, I can't remember, I think we technically own, do you remember, did we own internal comms?
I don't remember.
I know they didn't do anything without our
It would have
help.
been in Dave's group, right? So
Yeah, I think he had it. And then with IR, Shelley was our VP of IR, but there wasn't any kind of IR communication that went out without us being.
Well, yeah, I don't think marketing needs to be the gatekeeper, but marketing has to be helping to shape the messaging regardless of who the audience is, whether it's
Well, I think
internal or
marketing
external.
also has to be able to veto it.
That's true.
I don't think we need to necessarily own all of it, but you can't have, with all due respect to HR, you can't have HR going puking out stupid communications that are off, right?
yeah, you think about now though how much of your own employees own the communications externally of the company with social, right? They are the
Yes.
brand of the company, that they take whatever you're doing internally and spew it out through all their channels, and that becomes your voice of marketing out in the ether, right? So I think the ability to have some level of control over what you want your own employees to take, regurgitate, believe, drink Kool-Aid on, however you want to put it, and spit back out in the world is super, super important, because it's going at a speed that we've never seen before, right? You used to worry about like, oh, that email might get sent out somewhere, competitor or somewhere out in the world. Now it's like coming from the CEO's weekly communication and going straight out in somebody's Twitter account. And you're like, what just happened, right? So it's very, very
So
important.
how do you guys deal with that?
I think, and I'm going to step us back a little bit, because you talked about how do you be strategic, and if you take a company and you say, what's it all about? It's about making stuff and selling stuff. And I think that what happens sometimes is if marketing gets out of the role of we are here to help. We're either here to help you understand better what to make so we can sell it, or we're here to help us better sell. And that's about, here's why having a consistent message, here's why having a brand that really has a pure sense that people can understand, why that's important to selling the product. And if you link everything back to either making or selling the product, then I think it gives you a good platform to be able to have the right, I guess, frame for the discussions you might need to have over control. And if it starts to get into a control because we want control thing, then that's when it starts to kind of go off the tracks.
So let me push on you a little bit on this one, Janet. I don't think we make stuff and sell stuff. And I think words matter, right? And so I've heard a lot in our industry, we make shit and we sell shit and everything else is bullshit. And I've heard marketing is what you do when you have a shitty product. And so I think when we say that, well, on its face, of course it's true, right? We make some shit, people buy that shit, and the more they buy, the better it is for us. I understand that. However, what does it take to make people buy? What does it take to condition the market to come to us, right? And so I think the languaging is really, we have to be careful about it. And so that, that's why we like to say prosecute the magic triangle: product, company, category. And so I think in marketing, it's important for us to enable sales and to enable us to quote unquote go to market. But I think it's also, and frankly, in some ways more important, to make the market come to us. So I guess my only fear in what you say is, I think for years in a lot of industries, particularly in ours, marketing is like a service bureau. We wipe the ass of engineering and make their shit look pretty to the world, and we feed the Salesforce leads, and that's our job. And oh, by the way, a nice website, and Bob's your uncle, right? And so that's what I push on, because those things are important. But the most strategic thing I think a CMO does is design the category in such a way that the market comes to us.
And I think that's fair. And I guess what I would say is when you start the conversation, at least for me, it's helpful if I start the conversation is we're here to help make that system work. We make products, we sell products. And if you ask any salesperson, and that a lot of times is, for whatever reason, it seems like I've been coming into new jobs every couple of years or so. And so it's like,
really? You mean the CMO gets a new job every 24 to 36 months? Huh. Must be something wrong with you, Janet.
In my case, it seems to be because we sell these companies to someone else. But in any case, I think it helps to kind of ground the conversation and we're here to sell stuff. And then you tell the salespeople, and what you'd love is for the phones to ring rather than for you to have to go out there. So it's like, what's the easiest way to sell stuff? It's for people to come to us. Okay, how do you make that happen? And they know they don't know how to do that by themselves, right? They know that. And so then you can open up the conversation of category and how the category king is the one that everybody knows and everybody calls. And so I think it's I find marketing a lot of times is an education process because every person in the company, at least every engineer and half the salespeople think that they know how to do marketing really well, right? They do have that fun, like marketing is easy, I know how to do that. And so helping to educate them on like what it really takes, I think makes the job of leading the team a lot easier.
I would agree. I mean, I think to that point, I always say like, the marketer is always the one, like the finance person can go start like digging into the numbers and it's binary, right? The engineer can go start like going really deep in the technology and loses most of the room, right? The sales team, sales head of sales, they're either making their number or they're not. It's also very binary. The marketer is like, everyone has an opinion, right? And so it is. I mean, it's like
we get a lot of help.
Yeah, we get a lot of help.
Everybody thinks because they watch ads and they have opinions about logos and shit that they're a marketing expert.
Yeah, but look, I mean, it's up to the person in the role to shape their seat at the table and not let themselves be the one that everyone. Otherwise, you get a marketing team that has like 1,000 leaders with no strategy, right? And we've all seen that. Is that like you have people who just say, okay, you want this, okay, you want that, and then there's like you just get a bag of doorknobs, right? And so I think that though going back to like category design is such a unifying thing. So we just launched our category at Tenable. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
You want to tell us all about it?
I will tell you a little bit about it. Yeah, of course I will. So, so we're a company that is in the we still are in the vulnerability management space. So vulnerability management is like, scanning your network, scanning your assets, finding a bunch of shit that's wrong, like in the most pure
where the bad guys might be able to get. Where
bad design? Right?
Yeah, it could be misconfigurations. It could be human error most of the time.
But you're trying to find the trapdoors that Putin would use to get in.
Yes.
Or who flung poo over in North Korea.
That's how Chris writes. 4 words. Trapdoors Putin found.
Yeah, right. Oh, we found 4 Putin trapdoors in the network today. Excellent.
Yeah. Well, that's it. There you go. You can be our copywriter.
That's how it is.
How to keep Putin out of your network.
Yeah, exactly. No, but what it's kind of the analogy of like Salesforce and Salesforce automation to CRM, right? The category that Salesforce that created was around customer relationship management, which is about connecting the dots between sales and marketing and services and customer success and all that. But you can't do it without Salesforce automation because you got to figure out what the hell you're doing with your customers and you need the data. So we kind of took that same approach as our category is cyber exposure, right? And so what we believe
that's what you call it now, cyber exposure.
We believe that the way
that's fucking awesome.
Yeah. And you can't do it without vulnerability management. Because guess what? How the heck do you know if you're exposed unless you actually know where you're vulnerable? And who actually creates the data and has freaking years of experience actually going in and understanding where the issues are? Tenable. So we believe that we're in the best position. Where the vulnerability management is like the Salesforce automation, and our CRM is called cyber exposure, but it's beyond just looking at where your assets are vulnerable. It's actually creating a new discipline in how security is actually managed. And wouldn't it be amazing if the CISO could freaking go to the board meeting and actually say, we're not going to go into this market because guess what? There's too much exposure risk. Just like they actually look at financial exposure, right? Amen, right? And that
Wow, someone is excited about our
and,
category.
I love it.
And that, my friends, is how you deliver
That's
a
how-
provocative point of view.
Yes, but my point here is that it's been such the process. We can go on for hours about the process, but first of all, the whole executive team believed we needed to go there and we needed to do this, and they were all committed and bought in. And like that's like number 1, 2, 3.
It's
4,
a big
5.
part of why they wanted you to join the company.
Exactly. And it's been such a unifying, going back to the whole internal comms and culture, it's been such a unifying rallying cry for the whole company. Look, everyone wants to be on a winning team. Everyone wants to be doing something provocative. Who wants to be like the people in the basement? No one does. And like, it's helped with recruiting.
Did you move my
It's helped with-
stapler?
Yeah.
Remember that guy
Yes.
from Office Space?
Yes.
And finally, he ends up in the parking garage. Remember that? And he's all upset about the stapler.
Exactly.
What's that guy's name? Do you guys remember?
No.
No. Anyway,
don't.
we don't want to be him.
No.
By the way, that was a most excellent POV on that category design
Thank you.
right there.
Thank you. That's why, that's why I'm the CMO.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think? I got into this seat by accident,
Yeah.
mofo?
But this is why internal comms becomes so important, because you have like 10 executives sitting around the table that are like, we can all articulate it, but like that's only 10 people. How do you get the reach and the flywheel of your entire company out there evangelizing? And there's no way to do that. Internal comms becomes critical to that, because you have to condition your employees just like you condition the external market. That's even more important in the beginning, is getting every single person in that company, regardless of what function you're in, being able to tell the story and evangelizing it and getting it out on social and however else. That's how you build the flywheel.
Ba-boom.
Boom.
You got that, Deb?
Yeah. Have you had your first strike, JJ?
Well, we had our, what I would call, it's more of a thunderclap than a strike. So Black Hat is our big security show, one of the two. And so we decided to put the point of view out. We didn't have everything you would have for a lightning strike normally, but that's okay. And I think that's the other thing. There's really no one size fits all way to do it, because I said, we are not going to Black Hat and being the vulnerability management company. Not that there's anything wrong with vulnerability management, but like, this is a huge opportunity lost. We have this amazing point of view sitting there. Let's get it out there. And now we're going to unveil different layers of it over the next 6 to 9 months. So like the ecosystem, the blueprint, the other shit that we're doing that I can't talk about, but it's exciting. Like that's what makes it fun, right? So I'd say our big lightning strike is probably coming at the beginning of next year.
And then Janet, you had a very big outcome in your not so recent past, or recent past. Why don't you tell us about that and sort of what that experience was like for you, particularly as a marketer and a category designer?
Well, it's interesting because I joined Nimble Storage about 2 years ago right now. And the company had its first wave of success.
It was already public, yes.
It was already public, and it had done a great job in the, flash storage, space. However, to get the next wave, they needed to make some changes, and that was well recognized within the organization. They knew that they needed different messaging and different marketing. They may not have said we need to design a category, but they knew that something needed to change, and the salespeople were ready for it. And it was all because very sincere, credible people on the team, but they would start with an architecture diagram. Here, let me tell you about my technology and why, and then you can help figure out why it's going to be really great for you. And so we actually, changed the whole positioning of the company from just being about the architecture of the storage to being about the predictive analytics aspect that changed the life for the IT people, because they could predict and prevent issues. So that what they would say about it is the product just worked. And so that was a very powerful thing we grabbed onto. And, we ended up talking about the power of predictive. And so that was a quick ride after I was there about 1.5 years before HP purchased the company. So it was about almost exactly 1 year after we launched our all-flash product and rolled out the new category and point of view that the company was acquired.
And what was the new category and point of view?
Well, it was all about predictive flash was the category. And then actually we had just launched, we kind of evolved to predictive cloud. And so the whole idea was that the power of predictive was the ability to predict and prevent issues, so that you could make the applications go faster. And we actually called, and Christopher knows, the app data gap. That was the problem. When you're sitting there and your application is not showing you the data that you need and you have to wait, that's the app data gap. And I mean, the greatest win was when one of the very cynical SE leaders stood on stage at sales kickoff right when we rolled out this whole point of view, and we talked about it. So that like day 2, when he heard about it, something went wrong in a customer. He was talking about the customer and what the example was, and he said, and they had the app data gap. And we're like, score! I think we
have framed the problem.
Motherfuckers.
Yeah.
And so that was fantastic. And so by articulating the problem and then the solution being predictive analytics and predictive flash, that moved it forward.
And how much did you get acquired for?
I think it was $1.3 billion.
Yeah.
So.
And what kind of a premium was that on your stock?
Oh, I don't remember the exact premium, but the stock went, I don't know, 1.3. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
Yeah.
It was, you know what? And in the world that we live in, with storage not being so sexy, and it was a really good outcome for the company to be able to be acquired by an organization like HP that has the ability to make the investment, to take it forward, to make that investment to bridge into the cloud and to take the technology forward. And the exciting thing for me and the whole team was that in the announcement as to why HP acquired, they talked about predictive analytics and the predictive capability, and that was a clear differentiator for Nimble. And in fact, you know, they're going to continue to use that idea of predictive as they go forward and implement it across the HP product line, not only across storage, but they're looking at how can they integrate it into their server management. So it's, for me, I feel like, you know, when you, certainly the guys that have been there for a long time, you know, the technology was their baby and they wanted to take that forward. So being able to have the company, you know, have some lasting value of that technology, and then of course the messaging is fantastic.
I have predictive BTO. That's a great story. Just made me think of that when you started. I think we have the next category.
Dun, dun, dun.
I think something Janet said is so important in category design, and you talk about it, of course, in Play Bigger, but the ability for your salesperson, right, to be the one on stage talking about it when you launch something. I mean, there's nothing worse than launching any campaign, whether it's category design or not, and it just falling completely flat on the salespeople, right? If you can get that motion to carry all the way through, it's like the golden hour of, oh my God, they like it. They're using it. They're actually out there. I mean, we did that, of course, with BTO, but it's very rare. It, as you guys know, right? It's hard. Sometimes they're like, oh yeah, that's just the marketing stuff, you know, and you've really got to get that motion with the whole company.
Well, and I think that one of the things that we did as a team was we brought the sales leaders, but the people that had been with the company a long time and that were very effective at selling the product, we brought them into the process as we developed the messaging, and we tested it with them, and you know, kind of the, is this bullshit or is this going to fly kind of role. And we did with customers as well. But I think getting the thought leaders within the sales team, the people who are really respected, on board and having them feel like they were part of developing the messaging, and then they're evangelizing it through the sales team. It's not me up there saying this is a really great idea. It's someone that they know and respect delivering the message.
Totally agree. And I think that's where like great leadership comes in, but having the product background, you are inherently as a product person, like the hub of all these different, like, we call it the hub and everyone else is kind of the spoke, right? You're in the middle of like the customer and the sales team and engineering, and you're translating and synthesizing. And I think that that's skill set just of understanding how to work with and bring in other people into the process is a great skill that like we inherently, not that you have to come from a product background to have it, but as product people, like you're trained to do that as part of your job. And I think that's where that skill set comes into play. And I think I agree, like the thing you said about having the SE, the head of the SEs on stage, like when you get the head of the SEs, like to articulate your message, you've won, because right, they're usually the most cynical, but they are probably one of the most influential because they're sitting right by the customer all day long.
And when they don't have it and they're pissing all over the message that you've just worked so hard to get out, forget it. You're sunk.
Yep.
You're totally sunk.
Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned the sales engineers and the head of that organization, because that's a very interesting individual, right? Because typically, of course, they have a technical background, but of course, they're customer facing, they're sales oriented. Of course, the vast majority of them are comped on sales or bookings or what have you. And so they're this interesting cat in that they're technical, but they're quota-oriented, customer-oriented, sales-oriented. And so they're an interesting sort of truth test for point of view and marketing of all kinds.
When you find in a customer, a lot of times the customers will talk to the SE or the SE leader to get like the real, I want to know the real story, not the bullshit story.
Yep.
And so if they can tell the story and believe that it's the real story, then you know you have the real story, because you do. You don't want some marketing fluff stuff. You want to actually articulate the problem that the customer's struggling with, that the company can help them solve. And if you hit that, then the SE is willing to carry that message.
Right? Yeah, I think when the customer makes the decision, the person standing at the front of the room is either SE or a solution consultant or something. It's not the salesperson. It's a person who's gone deep in the product and said, like, this is how it's going to fix your business or solve your problem. And that is your that becomes your evangelist out in the field.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of two things. One, the relationship that you guys build with CEOs and how you think that works as a CMO. And then two, in the context of that, the role of the CMO, not as a service bureau for delivering just leads or any of that bullshit, but the role of the CMO as a true leader of the company.
Do you want me to start? I'll start.
You go ahead there, Jennifer Johnson.
So I think that, at the end of the day, as marketers, we have to build connections and bridges all across the organization. I think we've talked about that. But the one relationship that when the buck stops, it stops with the CEO. When everything else, and you strip everything else away, the only relationship that matters is the CMO's relationship with the CEO. A, they're probably your boss. B, they form the culture and the direction of the company. And depending on their belief in marketing, what they think the role of marketing is, their appreciation of marketing, your relationship with them personally, like there's so many dynamics, right, that come into play that is the most important relationship. And when that relationship goes south, it's like any relationship in your life. Sometimes it's great, and then it goes south. But when it goes south, you're screwed. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, I would say the only other person in the company that has that kind of relationship with the CEO is the CHRO. They are, again, right, it's a culture thing within the organization. It's the CEO's brand internally to their employees. And so I found the CHRO and the CMO have a very interesting relationship in regards to the CEO. Yeah. Because you're both kind of on the same, like you're both working towards the same goal for that person. They are, they become the face internally and externally of the company, and you both have the same objective for them, right? I think the relationship, I totally agree with everything you said, but the relationship that the CMO and the CEO have is one of, oh, please.
We got to pour some more whiskey here for this conversation, I think there.
I'll take a little more for this one.
Dr. Wolf, Dr. Johnson, a little more medicine.
But, you think about like what you want that person to be and what you want to put, the situations you want to put them in, right? Sure. And you always want that, whatever situation they're in. A lot of what you do is you prep them to go be as great as they can be.
It's totally true. So I was talking to someone just yesterday, someone who used to work for me, who's interviewing now for CMO roles. And she immediately said, like, well, I didn't take this role because I didn't like the relation. I didn't like the head of sales. And I said, yes, we all know that's an important relationship. But I said, you're missing the whole point of this. It's not about the head of sales. It's about the CEO. That's who you should be interviewing, right? You're like, the most important criteria, I believe, for any CMO to take a job is, who is the CEO? And do you want to work for them? Could you work for them? Do you trust them? Do they trust you? Do they understand marketing? That should, in my opinion, that should be the first thing and the most important factor. Not the only one, but it's the most important factor.
And you said last time we talked about this, JJ, that you interview their ass, not the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was looking for, my next opportunity, and I landed at Tenable, which is, by the way, like it's when you look at it that in that capacity, like it is the perfect company for me, and I'm the perfect CMO for them. Like it's like a beautiful relationship. And a lot of that, it's the whole team, but a lot of that has to do with the CEO that I work for. He's just an amazing human being. It's like you want to be in the trenches with them. But yeah, I did the whole VC tour, and I know you just went through the same thing, right? You do the whole VC tour, and then they want you to talk to their CEOs. And then I met a lot of phenomenal CEOs, but then it gets right down to like, who do you actually want to work with and for?
Well, and if you have a CEO, like a founder CEO, think about that. You're taking their baby and doing something with it. So the amount of trust that has to happen between that founder CEO and the CMO that's going to, diaper, clean, put in good clothes, and put out in the world.
That is so true. And I think people they completely underestimate. That's like such an important point, is that especially when they're first time founding CEOs, it's their first time founding a company. It's their first time being a CEO. It's their baby. They rightfully put their blood, sweat, tears, their money, their IP in this thing, and it's really hard to let go. And that's like a natural thing, right? It's just like really hard to let go of that, but you have to understand what you're walking into, right? People don't spend enough time on this part of the whole like company search process.
So as part of this, I almost don't want to say anything, but I kind of feel like I have to, given some of the discussion in the tech industry and in business in general of late, with men and women and in our
to the bro club
discussion. I don't have
these three women.
Well, look, I don't have a particular point or anything other than just to ask you, is there anything you want to say about sort of men and women and the bro culture? Is there any of that that's relevant to you or that you care about talking about?
I have a point of view, but I'll let them go first. Do you want to go first?
Well, so first of all, I have a lot of opinions on this. We could do a whole hour.
Well, and we could do a mini series. So I have no time constraint unless you do. So,
but I think for everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and everybody has their advantages and disadvantages. And there's some things that as a woman in business that you just need to understand. And that is that people have perceptions that they're going to bring to the table that are going to be based on, the way they were raised or whatever. And there's research that backs it up. So, there's a very interesting article in HBR about a year ago about women, in order to be perceived as competent, also need to be perceived as warm. But that's not a requirement for men. And that was really fascinating to me. Now, one could definitely argue that you would be a more effective leader if you were perceived as warm as well as competent, like the benevolent leader, right? There's nothing bad about that. It's just that the women have to have a little bit extra that maybe the guy wouldn't have to have in the same situation. And there's we all kind of have those examples of why, women, there's an expectation when a woman comes into a job that she will have done a job similar to that. With guys, a lot of times there's like, there's more of a leap that they might be able to make that transition to the next role, whether or not they've demonstrated. So there's a lot of data, that it'll back it up. But what what I say to my daughter and other women is like, you can't carry that around. Like, there's also a disadvantage if you're a shorter man versus a taller man, when you're in sales. So you can't carry that around as a chip on your shoulder. But it is something that it's helpful if you're aware that people are going to perceive you differently. So you might have to think about that as you work with them. And I think that's, to me, what I've tried to do is not be in a victim mode about it, but say there are some realities that we all need to deal with and be aware of to be successful. So anyway, it's my long speech.
That wasn't that long.
No, that wasn't that long.
I guess I would say, I've been in very fortunate situations where I haven't had to deal with the bro club mentality of, at least in the last 10 or 15 years of my career.
The horror stories we hear and guys saying horrible things and doing
them.
That doesn't happen to you.
Well, I've just been, look at Workday. They've got a female CIO, a female CHRO, not that unusual, female CMO, also not that unusual, a female like head of strategy, corporate strategy. I mean, that their management team actually might have more women on it. I'm trying to think.
Oh,
And
that's a fucking terrible idea.
It's been, you know, but it was never a deciding factor, and you never felt there was never any of that there. And that was a company that had a lot of its management team that had worked together for years, 10 years at PeopleSoft before, 10, 12, 15 years before it, before the acquisition at PeopleSoft. And so that was a dream. And I admire that company and culture for that so much. And my situation now, I mean, myself, our CHRO, our chief development officer, all women. I don't feel like I have a lesser seat at the table than any of the counterparts. As a matter of fact, we're probably all pretty, excuse my French, pretty ballsy women. And I don't think that it's like we have to be that way. We just sort of are that way in our roles. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'm dying to hear JJ's opinion. So
I was just looking at how much whiskey I had. Just kidding. Well, I said, so on the positive side of this, there are 4 people sitting around the table who have all been current or former CMOs, and 3 of the 4 are women. Now, I will say you could have us with 100 people and we'd be the only 3 women out of 100. But I think like that speaks volumes that you are having a conversation with 3 of probably the best CMOs in the Valley, right? And all 3 of us are women. So kudos to that.
I hate to interrupt you, but I'm going to on this one and I do want to hear the rest of what you have to say very much. And I want to make sure this is clear. You're not here having this dialogue, at least for me personally, because you're women. And this is the part I struggle with, right? I love each of you because you're fucking legendary. Now, you happen to be female, but so what? I don't care. And by the way, if any of you sucked, or if I sucked, you wouldn't be here, right? So this debate, this discussion is an interesting one because on one hand, we want to evaluate people for their abilities and capabilities, ability to produce results and make a contribution. And we want to make sure the playing field is level. But at the same time, I'm not a fan of any kind of reverse discrimination, right?
Agreed.
And you tell me, do any of the 3 of you think you become senior marketing executives because of the fact that you're female?
No, and that was not at all the point I was making. It was more of just.
No, I wasn't suggesting that's what
legendary
you're saying, but
CMOs.
I want you
Right.
to know that the fact that you're gals is great, and I'm in love with all 3 of you, and I actually do want to talk about that because I think it's an interesting thing to talk about. But we're not having a female CMO conversation, at least for me.
Right. No, but I do think, I mean, look, I don't want this to get into like past stories. Have I experienced, whether you call it a gender bias or discrimination or however you want to call it, I think the gender bias is a real thing. I've experienced it myself. I think that it's like, I go back and forth on this topic a lot because I never really experienced it until I became a CMO. So if you would have asked me this 10 years ago, I probably would have said, I don't see it. I just never had felt it. So I don't know if it was like the situations I was in or the fact that I wasn't sitting in the executive chair. I don't know what it was, but I had never felt it right before then.
When you say felt it, what's the it that you felt?
Being on the other end of the gender bias.
And what happened?
Yeah, I think it's little things like, it's the things that I think people talk about a lot. Like you can say the same thing that a man says and they'll listen to the man and they'll talk over the woman. Like little stuff like that I think people do sometimes unconsciously. Then I think there's more blatant, which I won't get into the specifics, but I think that there's more blatant examples of it. But I think it's, I go back and forth between, you don't want to be a victim, right? And it's the reality of the situation that as a female in technology at the executive level, you're going to be probably the only woman. We've all been in this situation more times than not when we are the only female in the room, whether it's our own executive team, whether it's the board. I mean, most of the time we are actually, I'd say 99% of the time we're the only female there. So you can sit there and say, well, woe is me. but like, what good does that do? Right. But then I think there's the flip side of this is like, why do you see so many women speaking out on this topic now? It's because like one or two people very vocally spoke out on this topic. And now it's like the floodgates have opened, because I think there's a lot of people who felt like they couldn't speak out on the topic. So now they are. So it's like, do you like, I never want to be a victim, right? But I do think it's a very real thing that we have to address as an industry. And I think there's been a lot of studies, which I totally agree with, that, when you have diversity on your executive team, on your board, you make better decisions as a company. We come at it, there's different perspectives, right? There's different ways of thinking about problems or solutions to the problem. And I think you need all of them, and I'm blessed in a situation now where my CEO founded a cyber diversity foundation. Like, he's a founding director of it. Like, that's how much he believes in it. Cause in tech, it's like 20%. In cyber, it's like 8%. It's like ridiculous. It's like 8% women in cyber. So what do you do about it? Do you talk about it to raise awareness? I don't know, I'm posing the question because I struggle with this. Like, do you talk about it to raise awareness of the topic, or do you just say, hey, look, this is the way it is, and I'm just going to do my job and not try to fight it? It's a tough one for me.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you have to acknowledge it and, and hope that you can drive as much diversity into the organization as you possibly can. And readily look for that because it's important to the company. And I think you're right. You do make better decisions, but you also have a job to do. And you're going to, most of the women I know in levels like ours or, the level right below it, or even the up and coming new people into the organization are like, let's go, right? Oftentimes the ones at the front of the pack.
Yep.
And I admire that hugely in all of you and in my coworkers that I have.
Well, and I think that you have to attack the problem in a couple of different angles. From a personal standpoint, as I talk to a lot of women and they ask questions and blah, blah, advice or whatever. If you're in an organization that's not friendly to women, find a different job. Don't try to fix that organization by yourself unless you're really in a position of power. Just go somewhere where you're more appreciated. Just like if they don't appreciate your skill set, you go somewhere. And I'll say I stayed too long in an organization where it was clear that if I would have been a guy, I would have been paid differently probably and had a different title and not treated like shit. So, that would have been, I should have left sooner.
Those organizations are not going to survive because the women coming out of school today and the, rules of engagement in business today just won't allow for it. They just won't.
But then on the flip side, I think we have an opportunity, the higher up in the organization you go, to model behavior and to ask hard questions that people lower in the organization can't ask. And so you can question some of the hiring practices or the way people are compensated. There's a million different ways to raise awareness because a lot of times there are guys in the leadership roles that just haven't thought about it. I find it really interesting when they start having children that are girls that are hitting college and starting to look for jobs.
Yes,
they become a lot more aware. It's amazing.
That's very
but I think you can do both, right?
Yeah, and I do think you could teach us to be better, for sure. And as a man, you learn over time. But the interesting thing, I think, Deb, that you're talking about, we got work to get done. Like I don't remember thinking about this very much when I was in the seat. What I remember thinking about is, how the fuck do we beat the fuck out of Tivoli at BMC and make sure that, CompuWare stays on the, near deathbed and do what we need to do. And so when it comes to hiring somebody, when the group of us interviewed each other, we're all looking at each other through a lens called, do we want to work together? Can we do awesome shit? Can we, design and dominate this category, even if we didn't necessarily maybe use those words? Like, I'm just looking at it from a perspective of, hey, we're trying to take over the world here. We got some shit to get done. Is this the best person? And I guess the thing that I find interesting is, if you take a libertarian sort of point of view, you would think the meritocracy of results would speak for itself, but it doesn't always. And so I find it interesting, Janet, that you say, okay, well, if you're in a place where, call it the meritocracy of my work or my results don't speak for itself because they're, whatever level of misogynistic they are, then fuck them, go somewhere else. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Don't waste your time. I think that as women, sometimes we're fixers. We think we can fix a situation. Some situations you're not empowered to fix. Just get out of there and go somewhere better.
I mean, that's not fun for me. What's fun for me is going and doing great work, right? With people who want to do great work. So I personally, if that was the relationship I had with the CEO, or I smelled that going into an interview and stuff, I don't want to be there. Like, it's not a place where I can be successful. Maybe it's because I'm a woman. Maybe it's just because they're assholes. Like, I don't,
yeah, exactly.
It doesn't really matter, right? I don't want to be there. They're not going to take over the world because they're assholes. So that would be on the evaluation, list for me. Is there's so many great places you can work that will have such an appreciation for what you can do.
Yep.
Go there.
Yeah. Well, and Chris, you and I both know I was at a company that wasn't a great fit for me. It was not having anything to do with being a woman or not being a woman. There were plenty of other people that couldn't figure out how to make that situation work. Right. And so, to your point, it doesn't really, if there's any place where it's not a good fit for you and they are they're assholes, or they're just not very good at what they do, you do need to get out of there. And I think the more I've done this, the better I am at interviewing those people around me to figure out if I really want to be with them, right? A lot of times you go into a job selling them on why you can do the job, and really what you said before of flipping it around, like, would you hire them?
Exactly. I think that's the heart of it all, right? Is that as any executive, take female, male out of the equation, any executive should be interviewing the company that they're going into as much as the company is interviewing them, right? But I think that this becomes, maybe more of a conscious criteria of our decision as females executives going into a company than maybe it would for men. Because I'll tell you, and I think I speak for all of us, I give a shit about results. I don't give a shit that I'm the only woman sitting at the table. Like, I don't think about that. And I actually think the men that I'm working with now don't think about that either. But like, it's the noise, and whether that's noise you allow in your head, right? Or it's noise that's just unavoidable, that sometimes there's noise that women at our level, I speak for a lot of us to say we give a shit about the results, but sometimes there's things that create distraction, right? That don't allow you. And that's what's frustrating for me, is like, just get all that bullshit out of the way and allow us to all just sit down and do our jobs. Now, whether that's noise that women create or not, I don't know. Right?
I'm not saying,
but
I didn't say that. Hey, I'm cooperating here, man.
Yeah. See, it's even hard to have this conversation,
no,
right? Like,
but here's the thing. There's an interesting thing, and I'm so stoked to be here with the three of you. I went to the dentist this week, and I had a filling from the time I was like 8 years old removed and replaced. And while I was there, the dentist is male and the hygienist is female. And you know me, I chit-chat with everybody. So we're chit-chatting with the hygienist. How's it going? And she's telling me what's up in her life right now. She's really excited about her co-ed soccer team. I said, oh, great, you're a soccer player, and tell me about that. And the first thing that comes out of her mouth is, well, I love playing soccer, and I found this co-ed team, and what I really love about it is being around a bunch of guys. I said, oh, okay. And she said, because I have a really conservative husband, and ever since we've been together, I can't have any male friends, and because we're on a soccer team, somehow this is okay with my husband. And I'm thinking to myself, get a new husband. Anyway,
get out of the marriage.
and so this is what I said to her. It just came, sometimes my internal monologue goes external. And what I said to her is, well, just because people have penises doesn't mean you have to have sex with them. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of people with penises I have no sex with. And so I guess with that said, like, it made this, what her comment about her husband made me think about this a lot. And here's where I'm at, because I knew you guys were coming, and I was thinking about you guys when this happened. And I'm going to say something crazy. I'm in love with every one of you. not in that way, right? And so I guess what I don't understand as a culture, and by the way, I fall in love with guys all the time too. I've been in love right now with this Navy SEAL named Mark Devine, who's a fucking man. And so I fall in love with people. I fall in love with kids all the time too, right? And not everybody, but you meet special people and you go, wow, like all three of us in different ways over our careers. For me personally, I had moments where I'm like, wow, fucking awesome, right? And you have that real affection, enduring feeling. And that's different. I'm going to say a word that, most people in these conversations very rarely say, that's different than a sexual feeling. And as a man in business, I don't know, maybe it's because I was raised by a single mother. I don't know what, but like I flick a switch in my head. So the sexual thing, I don't really think about, but that doesn't stop me from falling in love with you or, Mark Devine, the Navy SEAL. And in neither case is it a sexual one. So I guess, I don't know what my question is, but it's just like, I have found that it's okay to fall in love with people that you work with. As a matter of fact, it's pretty awesome. And there's different kinds of love, and that's okay. And so I don't know why this is big of an issue as it is. I guess that's what I'm asking.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's interesting because the whole sexual harassment issue for me is actually a pretty small part of, I think, the whole issue. So there are men who treat women as objects, right? And they don't respect them. And that can be a sexual thing, but there's also men that just don't treat women well. They don't respect them. That's not sexual. It's about the way they were raised or their own insecurities, and they don't want to be shown up or whatever it is, right? Whatever baggage they carry around. I think that the sexual thing is definitely an issue for some people, right? Probably some people more than other, I guess. I think I'm not very approachable that way. So people don't really bother me. Not since I was right out of school. I don't think anybody's like has any concept that like that might be something they could actually accomplish.
You mean like it might not go well if we sexually harass Janet? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Note to self, might not go well.
I don't think people really want to be said no to that badly. I think that's a lot of it, right? If you know you're going to get the no, like why bother? So, but there is a lot of I think there's a whole bunch of men that don't treat women with respect in a bunch of different ways that has more of an impact on their careers.
Yes.
And so I think that it's the whole package of, how can you treat women just like, how do you, whatever the different type of person it is, it's a minority, like I said, it's a short person versus a tall person, whatever the thing is, how can you have a culture in a company? How can you cultivate that culture? Because the company is going to be more successful with a great culture, right? And that culture is about respect and respecting people for their differences, whatever those are, and getting the most out of those people to your point, you're like, we got a job to get done. But we all know that companies with great cultures that get the most out of their people are the ones that are the most successful. And so why is this whole women's issue, a thing for companies to deal with? It's because they will actually do better if they get the most out of their employees, every single one of them. And I think that's the point.
But I think you hit the nail on the head that it's not, everyone thinks it's about sexual harassment. Like I couldn't agree more that it's not about that. It's like it's the small little things that over time start to grate on you and I don't want this to turn into like a women versus men thing at all. Right. But I do think this is an important conversation. It's the small little things that a lot of times people do unconsciously, that as a woman, when you're the only woman in the room after years and years and years, like how can it not at some point, how can you not notice it?
What's an example of that?
Well, the one that you mentioned about
true.
A woman will have an idea. A woman will have an idea, and this is data shows this, right? A woman will have an idea and she'll voice it. And then if a man picks up on that idea and seconds it, the man gets the credit for the idea, not the woman.
That happens all the time. Interrupting, another thing. Like not polite interrupting all the time.
With intention.
Or with intention. That's
or
right.
All
the time. Yeah.
I totally agree with all of this, but man, we've come a long way. I
Yeah.
have to think we've come a long way from my days, early ad agency days, when I worked on every semiconductor company except for Intel in the Valley. And by the way, these were the days where like you went into a conference room and there were ashtrays on the table and everyone was smoking in the room. No scotch. No scotch.
Did they have porno mags too?
It seems like it. You know, when it was common for someone across the table to say, "No, sweetheart, that's not what we mean." And how, you know, today, like,
Yes.
not even like we're worlds away, and thank God we are, right? But I think it's more of an unconscious bias that exists today that has come along with people that we are weeding out. You know, we're consciously weeding it out, and we're forcing it out of the organization.
I agree. And I think like, I agree that bringing it back to the positive is that we have come leaps and bounds. And I think that like raising attention to, we're continually getting better as an industry. But I think like going back to where I started with this, like the three of us are sitting here, not because we're women, because we're freaking badass executives. Period. End of story. No other conversation needed on that topic.
Excellent. So tell me about how you guys think about the future, both in your careers and in your lives.
It's a huge question.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe Janet, it's great to start with you because you're
I've
in
been
a
thinking
brand new
about the future.
You're in a brand new job, and you're in a new phase of your life as a as a parent. And do you want to talk about that a little bit? Share some of that.
Yeah. So I have two kids, and one is a junior in college, and the other is a freshman. So my husband and I are empty nesters now.
I'm telling you, Janet, it's free birds. Free birds.
Yeah, it does feel that way. It is a little quiet at home, I have to say. But and I just moved from, as we said, Nimble Storage was acquired, and I spent the summer off when my kids are home, which was very fun. And I accepted a role at Palo Alto Networks, so I'll be launching onto something new. And you know, it is interesting, and thinking about, I think that what I want to do, when you start to look for jobs and you're later in your career and you have a little bit more choice, I mean, the number one priority was, what's a good culture? What's a good job content that I want to do the work, and that's the work that I'm going to enjoy. I'm going to enjoy the people that I'm with. The company has an interesting mission. And, you know, and I start to think about, and this was part of the decision, you know, it wasn't the big factor, but I thought about the fact that a company that's a little bit bigger like Palo Alto, you have a platform, you know, so you have an opportunity as your own kids are moving away, you know, you start to think about, how can I help other, you know, this whole problem of women in technology, and how can I get more involved in that? And so I think that for me, you know, what I want out of a role, I want to contribute. I want to have challenges. I want to learn. I want to do all that stuff. But you think about, what are there other aspects that you can also pull into the job that maybe I didn't have as much time to deal with when I had two little kids at home.
The other one, forgetting your role as a parent for a second, is my understanding of your background is you've been more joining companies who are aspiring to be category kings and trying to help them become category kings. Is that fair?
That is one thing that I've looked for, because if you think about, like, what do I know how to do and what can I add? I feel like my own value that I can add, you know, you guys can do it as well, but a lot of people don't know how to create that. And so that is something that I can do. That's a differentiator for me. It's a value I can add in the organization.
But you're joining Palo Alto Networks, who in our data science research for the book Play Bigger is the most successful enterprise value creator in the last decade or so. So clearly a category king. So why join an existing category king that's already public?
Well, because you think there's a great opportunity in your book. You talk about how you continue to expand the category or create new categories. And I think that there is an opportunity for the company to go to the next level and define a new category. And so that could be exciting. It could ignite the next level of growth in the organization.
I mean, it's making the assumption that just because you're an existing category king in a public company, that you can't continue to become a
I'm not making any assumptions. I'm just asking a question.
A bigger category king.
That's right.
You know, the other thing I find fascinating about what you've done So we had the CEO of Splunk, Doug Merritt, on Legends and Losers. And Doug is an amazing leader. And one of the interesting things about his career, many people have it that once you get to a certain quote unquote level, and what most people mean is title, that you would never take a lesser title because that would mean you have a small penis or something terrible or whatever, right? And in Doug's career, multiple times he's gotten some big title, and then the next job he takes is the title or a title or two below that, and so forth and so on. And as we were talking about this, I said, that's really curious to me. You know, he's a big, strong, sexy, manly man, right? And that's not normally what you'd expect. And he made comments about, doesn't matter. It's about the team. It's about what I'm doing, the role, and this kind of stuff. So with all that said, you're a 2-time CMO, but you're not in the CMO slot at Palo Alto. How did you think about that?
Yeah, so I will be the SVP of product marketing. And if you think about, category and where that comes from, it really comes from product marketing. So at the end of the day, it's an interesting challenge. I get a seat at the table. So I'm part of the exec team and helping to drive things, which is something that I value in a great culture. So I believe that I can have a huge impact and love my job every day. And so the title is not for me what's the most important thing, right? It's that other stuff I mentioned, it's who I'm going to be working with and what am I going to learn and what can I contribute? So I feel really good about it. I'm sure there are going to be people who are like, why did you take that job or whatever? But, Palo Alto is a very well-respected company. And so I think a lot of people intuitively will get that. And it's also getting to be a huge company. It's like a $2 billion run rate company. So it's a big...
What's the market cap? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't know.
I'll look it up.
I've been on vacation.
I'll look it up.
But you know what? It went up 10% after they announced results. So it's better than it was a couple of weeks ago.
I thought it went up 10% when they announced you joined the company.
Yeah, that hasn't been announced yet. I'm sure that'll be a 15% bump. But yeah, it's a big organization and with a lot of products. So I'm excited I feel like I can have a huge impact. And so that's what we care about.
Right now, it's only worth, let's see here, $12 billion. Yeah.
13.
Yeah. Excellent. And Deborah, you've been involved with so many category kings.
Yeah, I've been lucky. And blessed with an amazing career. I really have. But I think, I have a freshman in college now. So you start thinking about what do you want for them and what do you want to be. It's funny when I always said when my kids were little, anybody could kind of take care of them, right? They needed, some after school care and stuff like that. But when they get to the point where they're making life choices, and I think these like young adults that go off to college are making the big life choices, right? You get them through high school and you're like, okay, now you're out to fly, but, and you try not to be too much of a helicopter parent and that kind of thing. Right. But I think for me, it's the thing about my career has been that's most important for me has been finding the right sort of trajectory in the company. And I think for your, like the company's trajectory and your career, if they align or you can like cross them at the right time, it's magic. And that means that you might, I probably would never go take the SVP role at Palo Alto Networks because I'm just not that person. It's not where I feel passionate and where I feel like I can add value and where I feel like, I joined Workday, it was 60 people. I left when it was 4,000. And it was
what a ride.
Unbelievable, phenomenal. Like I will never have that opportunity again. It was the most fun, amazing opportunity in the world. But at 4,000, I look back and I'm like, okay, I was there almost 9 years. When was I like absolutely the best, most happiest in my entire time there? First 4 years. And why? Because I was in the trenches. I knew the salespeople. Like I had the 10 salespeople that made the biggest impact on that company. They're on my Christmas card list. I go on vacation with them. I have like one of them called me yesterday morning. It's that for me, that's where I get up every morning and get a charge out of getting my crap on, getting with shitty pants on Bart and going in, right? Like, that's what it's about. So it's, I think for, you know, for anyone in their career, and I tell this to millennials coming out of school all the time, you will figure this out in your career. And it's probably the most important thing that you can learn about. Like, you can work at lots of different companies with lots of different products, with lots of different whatevers, right? People. But if you can figure out like what is the best size, shape, and sort of time at the company's trajectory that you feel the best about it, that's when you're going to be the happiest. And you always do the best work when you're happiest.
That's right.
So
the other question I really want to get into with you guys is, you know, how do you think about your work or your life in and outside of work and combining those two things? And yeah, you know, you hear a lot today about work-life balance, which I think is a bullshit construct because I think it's all your life. But the three of you have really big lives, both in and outside of work, and huge priorities and huge commitments. And so how do you think about that?
I'll start. So I think that you're absolutely right. I believe work-life balance is a crock of shit. And I think it's about how you choose to live your life and the role that work plays in that. So for me, I mean, I took a different path. I don't have children, and, you know, work is work is not my life, but work doesn't define me. But I will say, like, I really enjoy building something bigger than myself. There's something very intrinsically when you figure out about, like, why do you do what you do? You know, for me, it's about, you know, and being inside. And actually, the other interesting thing is we're all in cybersecurity, right? I think that's another interesting thing. We're all CMOs in cybersecurity.
Actually, I didn't realize that until just now. How the fuck did y'all end up in the security space?
I mean, for me, it was like, it's, I have to really believe in being some part of something bigger than myself. But I truly believe that, like, in cyber, you can connect what you're doing up to doing good for humanity. Right. And I take my role very seriously. To me, work is not about, I don't think for any of us it is, but, like, you know, it's not about just collecting a paycheck. It's for me something very intrinsic to who I am. And when I'm off balance, you know, I do a lot of other things too outside of my life. I was at the US Open last weekend. I was just in Miami. I'm going to Mexico next week for vacation. Like, I do a lot. Like, I have a very full life.
And are you the world's largest NFL fan?
And I have a huge NFL fan. I actually got my entire executive team. We drafted a fantasy team this week.
While you were in Miami?
While we were in Miami. So yeah, I love football. Like, I have a lot of interests outside of work, but when my work life is off kilter, my whole life is off kilter. And, like, for me personally, you can't separate the two because they're too intrinsically intertwined. But I, you know, at some point, like, I love what I do. I love the industry I'm in. You know, I want to be able to look back on my career and say, you know, like, you know, I had 25 CMOs that worked for me that I helped groom, and I was part of their journey to become something great too. So that's why I do what I do.
Janet, Deb?
I don't know. You know, I agree. You can't really separate work from your life. You know, through the years, it's been different hours or whatever. You know, you have to leave at 5 because of the nanny, and then you put the kids to bed, and then you get on email. You know, it's all intertwined together. You know, I remember when one kid, you know, having him in meetings and stuff like that at work. You know, you know, it all has to flow together.
I hate to interrupt you, but do you remember when you and I were interviewing?
Well, I remember that we did not bond immediately.
I do remember that. What do you remember about that?
I just remember that I was maybe a little bit more reserved than you. And you're very, I don't know, it was just, I didn't really know how to take you. I think that would be the right way to say it.
So what was going on in your head? This is absolutely not what I expected to be talking about. What do you mean what was going on for you?
I don't remember what was going on for me, but I do remember that I was interviewing to work for Sue, and
Yeah.
Sue and I connected, like, really well. And I I wasn't worried about working with you, but I wasn't really, a lot of times you connect with people or you don't connect with people.
Right.
And we just didn't connect right away. And then later we connected really well, but it just took a while for me to understand where you were coming from. I think that would be the best way to say
Yeah,
it.
well, you weren't the first. I seem to remember, and you tell me if you remember this, I do seem to remember you asking me about this issue about, hey, if I have to leave early for the kids' game and the this and the that. Do you remember that discussion?
I don't, but it's out, that's always been a priority. Can I have enough control over my schedule at work that I can have the life that I want? And that even today, right? That was one of the things I tried to figure out at Palo Alto is like, am I going to be jerked around all the time or can I manage my life?
But what I remember about that part of it, we talk about the not connecting part because I remember that too. But you bringing up your commitments with your family, I remember sitting there and thinking, why do you even have to bring that up? And I can't remember exactly what I said. Hopefully I was a gentleman about it, but I probably said, I don't give a fuck whether you're here or whether you're there, whether you're up or you're down. I give a fuck about producing results. And if you produce the results and you're here 2 hours a day, I don't care. It's probably what I said. But the interesting thing is that back then, that's a long time ago now, you thought you had to bring that up.
Yeah.
Right. And I never give a shit about anything other than results. I do remember, you're a very, you can have a very non-expression on your face and hard to reach. And I can remember saying to Sue, like, you sure she's going to fit in? And she said, she's going to be awesome. And I said, great. And the funny thing is, to get back to the point I think, JJ, you made earlier, Janet, you and I did not have a personal connection. Quite the opposite. It wasn't bad. It was just like I didn't get you. It was
non-existent.
And clearly you didn't get me. And it didn't matter. And we went to work together. And at least for me personally, what created our relationship in the beginning was I saw you work. And you were incredible. And Sue was right. And I was glad you were on the team. And that, for me, opens the door to a personal connection when at the beginning there wasn't one.
Yeah.
I'd be curious what it was for you.
Well, I think that, like I said, I think I just didn't know how to read you or how to, I wasn't sure what you were looking for and, what you wanted. And I think that for me, as I got to know you, then I got to better understand where you were coming from. And I think that was a lot of it. Right. And then I relaxed a little bit more because I think, what did the on your into it's like off-putting to some.
Yeah.
Like it was almost like I kind of put up a guard because I really didn't, like, there was a lot going on over there and I wasn't really sure how to deal with it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just work for Sue.
He was drinking during the interview.
I don't think that was
good?
it. But anyway, it was all good in the end. But I think, when you think about cultural fit, like I wouldn't have initially said, oh yeah, Christopher and I were in sync. However, my connection with Sue, I felt very confident that we clicked in, we had lunch. We're like, okay, she's like, I don't know what job we're going to have for you, but we'll find one. And that's really, kind of what happened. I came in with kind of a weirdo job that everybody's like, what is that job? And then eventually I had a different job and that was all good. And, but she and I clicked really well. And you don't always know, right? You get to know people and you uncover that.
Well, and I've learned over time, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, is to, we had Eric Weinmeier on Legends and Losers. He's the famous blind athlete who summited Everest and did the Grand Canyon, all that. An incredible, incredible guy. And he talks a lot about not trusting your brain. Right. And so, we sometimes, our first, for me, I know my first impression's wrong a lot because many of the people I love the most in my life, my first impression of them was not necessarily positive. So over time, I've learned, to quote Eric, not to trust my brain because my first impression might be wrong. And I didn't have a negative first impression of you. We just didn't connect. I remember, Deb, you and I don't know how you felt, but I felt a connection immediately.
Yeah, as you were talking, Jen, it's funny. I totally remember our interview, and my job had sat empty for a long time. It was like 9 months or something. And Amy Swanson referred me into Mercury.
Right.
And she and I had worked together at PeopleSoft, and she was like, and I called her, I'm like, I'm meeting with Chris. I'm not like, it says human exclamation point. Like, what is, and she goes, yeah, like I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how it's going to be, because it's always different, but it's always just sort of there, like very present. And I remember our interview too, and it wasn't very long. It was kind of short. And I thought, well, that either went really well or this job's going to sit open for another 3 months. But it was sort of for me, again, trajectory, sort of point in your career. For me, it was the perfect job. It was like, you'll get to do a little bit of this advertising thing, a lot of this brand thing, and you got to like figure out what we're doing on the internal, all of our assets and what they look like and sound like. And, and underneath that, there was some technology, very early technology aspect of it. I mean, we put the media bin in, we put systems and stuff in for sales. And I mean, again,
all the online training we did,
all of it,
when
right?
we did it was a giant
unbelievable for that time in all our careers. But that, I mean, going to work for you at that time, for me, I had been, a long time in my career on the ad agency side, and then some shorter times on the client side. And I thought, this feels like a good combination of both, because Chris had that, you had very much of an agency-like feel to it with a client side, opportunity. So, yeah, I remember like it was yesterday, actually. there might have been drinking in our interview. I don't know.
There might have been drinking, yeah. So, how do you, when you think about your lives, how do you think about work and your life? And I know all three of you have had some big shit show up in your life. I mean, Deb, I don't know how much you want to talk about some of the shit you've had to deal with in your life, and you had some heavy shit to deal with in life when you were taking on giant CMO, giant marketing leadership jobs.
I don't know if you remember this, but I was sitting, this is a testament to the people that you work with. I was sitting in a room at Mercury with Danny McKeever, figuring out the assets that were going into Media Bin at the time when we were loading that up, when I got the call that my dad had brain cancer. And I'm going to start crying. And my dad passed away. Like, it was 13 weeks start to finish when he was diagnosed to when he left us. And by the way, that was the time that the brand went upside down. The company went upside down, right? Had all of the stuff going on with the stock. And it was a monumental time in my life that you realize at that point, and the ironic part about that, I don't think Danny would mind me telling you, literally driving out of the hospital, my dad was diagnosed October 10th, probably like 6 weeks later. As I'm coming out of the hospital, Danny walks by, same person. So, what are you doing here? He's like, my mom was just diagnosed with brain cancer. Same exact cancer. So I spent Christmas of what it would have been 2005, I guess. 2000, and would have been right around that time, in the hospital with Danny, like our parents next to each other. So you have these moments. I mean, that kid is my rock. And but then, as 7 months into my new job at Lookout, was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember, first of all, I remember walking downstairs immediately into my CEO's office, which, again, it's a moment where you realize like who you're working for. And he knew I was going through tests and stuff. And I said to him, look, it's positive, I've got cancer. And he completely lost it. And I was like, what are you doing crying? Like, I should be crying. What are you doing? And I mean, the kindest, most gentlest soul in the world. And that's when you realize, like, I picked the right guy, right? He's like, I'm working with the right people, and the people around me are the right people. And that's when I think when you realize, like, there is no work-life balance. Like, what is that? Is that work or life? It's all the same shit, all in the same bucket, all in one day. And if you only have work or only have life and they don't do this, then you can't get through a time like that, either one of those times,
And so how do you as a new CMO in a hot company, new job, you want to do all the awesome things I know you want to do. You're a mom, you're a wife,
Yeah.
you're a lot of other things. And now you have cancer and you know the cancer is going to take you out of the seat a bunch. How do you do that?
Yeah. I was lucky. I had hired some really good people. You know, I had hired people that had worked with me before, so they knew the language. Like I left that day and went home and, you know, literally couldn't tell some of those people, said, you guys got to deal with this and tell those people. But that they could pick that up. And I think that's super important. I mean, we always talk about sort of succession planning. That's like succession planning in a moment of minutes. You're like, someone has to pick up the ball here. You know, I worked through a lot of my treatment because it just kept me going. Like it was just what I wanted to do. I didn't want to check out. There was of course, you know, I was in treatment. There were days where I was like, I gotta go. I'm in chemotherapy right now.
You lost all your hair.
I lost all my hair. I wore a shitty wig.
And I lost all my hair too, but it was a lot less traumatic for me.
Actually, that is a good men-woman thing at work. Like it's so okay for men and so not okay for women. But yeah, I mean, I had a good team. That's, you know, I've learned, as you guys I'm sure have too, hire the best people you can so that if you have to leave in a minute, you can. But I just kept going. I wanted to keep going. It's it wasn't work. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. It was just part of what I was doing. And a lot of support, huge amount of support. Lucky.
And how have you guys navigated that in your work when shit shows up in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I started tearing up when you were telling me that story. I mean, I think it's amazing what you went through, and then to have, you know, I think your work family becomes your family, right? In a lot of ways. And, you know, I think it's also the people who you choose to be your mentors. Like I know you guys know Michelle Feaster, who is also on your show. Like she's been, you know, such an instrumental person in my life that when I was working for her, I think I just was going through the motions of life in a lot of ways. Like I had a good job and I was doing well, and I got married to a person that I shouldn't have been married to. And then I got divorced because I didn't have I don't know if it was like the confidence or what it was to actually start really like questioning or thinking that I could actually do something more than I thought. Like this is the path that I should be on because that's what I deserve. And Michelle.
Hold on, I'm interrupting.
Yeah.
What the fuck did you mean by what you just said? What does that mean?
Oh, I think I just was going through the motions of like, okay, now I have a good job. I'm going to keep going on this path. Now I'm, you know, in my early 30s, so I need to go get married. And like, this is what you do. And it wasn't.
So you married him because, I mean, obviously you liked him and loved him.
Yeah, he's a great human being, but I didn't stop to think of like, what could my best life be? I just thought about, I'm going to check the box to go through the motions because that's what you're supposed to do. And I think like when you find a person who, you know, not only was an amazing work mentor, I mean, I went from being an individual contributor to a CMO in 5 years, right? Partially because of all of you, partially because of Michelle, because she
partially because of the fact that you're fucking legendary.
Well, yeah, but my point, you know, I always had it in me. I needed to have somebody help me unlock that part of myself is I guess the point I'm trying to make. And it transcended my whole life, not just my career path, but it made me like question and really think more about how can I be the best person and how can I live the best life and what is it that I actually deserve in life. And I think when you when your work family becomes your family, they drive you, or they help you see things that you didn't see in yourself.
Janet, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, like, I've been fortunate, right? You know, I've been blessed with healthy kids and, you know, little issues here and there and stuff. My mother, though, does have cancer now. And so it's something that we're dealing with. But I think as things happen in your life, whether those are big things or little things, like, you know, one of the transitions I went through is I woke up one day and, you know, first of all, I was stuck with remember the volcano that erupted, and then I was stuck in Europe, and then I was stuck with a snowstorm in Heathrow. And, you know, you kind of get this aha of like, okay, I'm traveling 40% of the time and my kids are growing up and I'm like a guest in my own home. Sometimes I come home and they're like, oh, great to see you, but life's been going on without you, you know? So you kind of reevaluate and, you know, there's these points where things happen, right? Sometimes it's something like, cancer, and sometimes it's just something like, hey, hello, you're not home. And then you just have to kind of realign your priorities and figure out. And so for me, it was switching jobs, maybe jumping into a new job too quickly because I'm very goal oriented. So I
Really?
switched on
I never
schedule.
noticed that, Janet. Very task oriented, goal oriented. Where's the list? Tick, 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 go, go, go. I never noticed that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the checklist. Oh, I need a new job. Oops. Oh, I picked poorly. Oh, well, we'll do this for a year. But, even then that year was a great year because I didn't travel at all on business, ran a half marathons. We had great vacations. I spent a lot more time with my family, because I was home all the time. So you kind of, I guess, you just keep, it's just like business, and that you kind of go through life and you keep making course corrections, right? You learn something, you make a little correction. Sometimes they're big corrections and sometimes they're small corrections because you're like, we're totally off track.
Sometimes life forces you to make a correction, right, Deb?
Right.
Oh, for sure.
Right. But I think it's that continual learning that you have to do to keep things going the way you want it. And now, we're getting to a new phase with my husband and I, and, so what are my priorities? So I realized, I should go home and have dinner with him. So he's not just home alone all the time.
I bet he'd like to see you.
Yeah. You know what? I think that's probably fair.
I mean, I don't know Glenn that well, but I'm going to guess that he wants to see you.
Yeah. I think he'd rather not have dinner alone or, just golf all the time. He'd like me to come home and say hi.
And particularly you. Yeah, that would be my guess.
So anyway, we keep making these adjustments as our life goes forward. So it's important to keep that learning.
That's right. It's a journey, right?
And what do you think, if you could sort of talk to your, 25-year-old self or 20-year-old self, what would you say?
Oh. I don't even know. I mean, probably just not be so afraid.
Yes.
Not be so afraid. Be brazen. And it took a long time to get there. It took a lot of, figuring things out and realizing like you didn't have to check the boxes. I admire the millennials coming out of school today for this, because I think that I was having a conversation with one the other day who's actually leaving my team.
You actually talk to millennials?
Oh, I don't have a choice, dude. I work in San Francisco.
I'm kidding. I got millennials up the ass, and I love them.
And I do too. But I do remember thinking as I was chatting with her, and I opened the door. I said, "Tell me what we could do better. Where you're leaving. What I applaud where you're going, but tell me where we missed, or what made you pick up the phone and take the call when some recruiter came looking." And she laid it out there. I mean, she was no holds barred. And I left that meeting and I walked back to my office and I thought, shit, I never would have said that to the CMO when I was 24, ever. And I don't, there was nothing, she didn't do anything wrong or say anything bad, but first of all, I was raised by an Army colonel. So let's start there. So I was like, yes, sir, no, sir. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. But just, I think, be less afraid, be more willing to just go. And, and it took me a while to get there. I'll admit it.
To give yourself permission.
I'm almost 50. I'll be 51 next week. I mean, it's been a journey of figuring that out.
Yeah, it takes I totally agree. I was going to say the same thing. Don't be so fucking afraid. That's, I think, my second F-bomb. I have one more. One more left.
Oh, speaking of that, let me share this with you. My good friend John Berghoff sent this to me. Check this out.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's an F-bomb.
That's an F-bomb.
Isn't that fucking awesome?
That's awesome. Yeah, I think people, I think a lot of times you're only like hampered by your own internal narrative in your head, right? And so I think it's about like being in it, and some of that just comes with time, right? Like some of it you can't, some of it's generational, some of it you can't force, because it comes with wisdom and maturity and all that too. But like, you never stop learning. Like my first executive coach that I ever had, my book, see, I brought it's like JJ's book club. And it's called Design. I think, and I apologize because I don't even know the name, but it's called, I think, Designing Your Life. And it was my first executive coach, and he was one of the founders of Electronic Arts, and he teaches, he actually has a design your life kind of curriculum at Stanford. He's a product designer, and their whole
What's his name?
philosophy, Dave Evans, who's amazing. I wouldn't have got through my first executive role if it weren't for him. But his whole philosophy is about designing your life like you would being a product designer, and like thinking about the problem and reframing the problem and coming up with alternatives. And it's cool. And I feel like I'm always a student of my life. And I think everyone should approach life that way. Is you can have a great plan and then it goes to shit. Right. And I think it's always about iterating and understanding where you are and where you want to go, and not letting fear's the one thing that will hold you back from that. So, we don't ever figure it out, do we? I hope not.
It's interesting. Whenever I don't know about figure it out. I don't know that I ever have the experience of figuring it out, but I do have the experience of, okay, I've got my life to the place where it's supposed to be. And now it's kind of going to be like this. And of course it never is.
Exactly.
Right. And so I cling to that famous John Lennon quote that says, life is what happens while you're making plans. Right.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. But I mean, I think it's about you can have a direction for where you want to go, but there's lots of ways to get there. And there's not just one solution. Like, you can iterate and find different things that work for you. And I think it's okay. So like failure, this goes back to the whole philosophy of your podcast, is that you have to fail a lot to actually succeed. Right.
Yeah. That's actually, I mean, as type A women around the table, and
I'll be a type A woman.
Sure. Or super just high expectation people, like the idea of being a loser and failing and like letting it's
not
hard.
Possible, right?
To look yourself in the mirror and say, like, I did all of these things except for I made this bad decision to go to this company, or I went to this company and they fucked up, or whatever the case may be. Like, some of it's in your control, most of it isn't. It's okay. Like, maybe that's my other thing, I guess, beyond the like be braver, would be like, be okay with it.
Yes.
Be okay with just letting it happen and being a loser once in a while.
Yes.
Hey, Janet, what's your advice to the 20 or 25-year-old Janet Matsuda?
Well, I think, first of all, the grit thing, Angela Duckworth, and that, it's that, tenacity, right? Yes, you're going to have a setback, you learn from it and then you move on, right? Or the, mindset book or whatever. I love all these books, with these great models. But if I look back, I think that early in my career, I felt like I needed to know a lot. Like, I needed to be the expert. And I think one of the things I learned was that people weren't going to think I was stupid. I didn't really have to prove my expertise, that especially as you go up and you go in management, but even as a member of the team, there's a book called The Multipliers, and it's all about how do you ask the questions to help people get to the answer. And some of the best coaching I got is like, you don't have to come in with the answer. If you come in with the questions and you let everybody else come up with the answers, and then you can have your perspective as well. But that shepherding of the process is more valuable than actually coming in with the answer. And I think that's, it's that relax and let the process play out.
Yes.
I love what you're saying, Janet, because I remember when I finally learned that my job was not to have the answer, because I felt like somebody who was relied on for the big idea a lot. And I'm good at coming up with a big fucking idea, with all due modesty. But I remember as an executive learning that wasn't my job. It was great when I did it, but my job was to create an environment for not just the big idea, but also for the results to occur and all of that. And so how do we create an environment where legendary people can do legendary work, whether it's tactical execution work, which is incredibly important, or whether it's big idea thinking or things in between, right? And for me, that was a relief. It's like, oh, I don't have to come up with all the big ideas. I create the environment. Maybe I help people identify which is the big idea that we should go with, but I don't necessarily have to I don't have to create them all.
I've found it's actually kind of dangerous when we do, because it's a one track idea that hasn't been baked or thought out, or really, we come up with something and we're like, blah. And then the whole team's like, we're doing blah. And I'm like, I was on a conference call early this morning, and I said something to the whole team, and I said, listen, my assertion about this does not mean that's directive. That means you guys go talk about it and tell me if I'm full of shit, or tell me if I'm, you've got a better idea, or if maybe I'm right. But I don't want you to just take that as Deb says, go do this. Wrong idea. I hired you for your brains. Go figure it out.
It's so funny you say that, because I speak in very declarative terms. And to your point, Deb, over time, I've learned to preface some of my comments with, I might say this like it's is. I'm actually saying this like a question. I want you to know even if it doesn't come out like a question, I mean it like a question. I'm much more interested in the dialogue than in like, oh, here, I've been to the bush, and here we have the 15, the 10 commandments. I'm because I already know what I think. I want to know what we think. I want to know what's better than what I think, or what's different than what I think, right?
Yeah, totally. And it's a dangerous thing to get into. If you're the one standing at the front of the room and you're like, just do this, that's a bad place to, for me, that's a bad place to be. I want, and I don't want my thing to then just be executed. It's like, please rip it apart. Yeah. Tell me it's awful. Like, put it back together in a different way, and then let's go execute, Yeah,
it's interesting when you get clear that what I'm committed to, what my job is the result. I don't care, who comes up with it. How my job is to enable the result.
It takes a while to get there, right? I mean, I think you actually had me think about that I'm kind of the same way as you, Christopher. Like, I get very excited about ideas and really passionate, and then I'm out there and I'm like whiteboarding, and then everyone takes that passion as like, I know exactly a directive, right? And like, it's me brainstorming. And I certainly don't have the right answer all the time, right? As none of us do, to the point. But like, people can take that enthusiasm to mean like, exactly what it is, right? And I think understanding that about yourself, I learned something today about my own style. I need to start prefacing that more.
And when we're, with all due modesty, when we're a good leader, that's how we talk.
Yeah.
That's how I fucking talk. Sure. Like, hey, listen, I just talked to Jesus, Allah, Moses, fucking the Dalai Lama, the Big Lebowski, or whoever else you pray to, and this is the fucking answer. I know I talk like that. And sometimes I mean to talk like that, but a lot of the times I don't. And so we need, it's very powerful to this is where we get back to, I think the number one most important thing, we talked about this earlier, in an executive or leader of any kind, is be self-actualized.
Yes.
Right? Like, hey, sometimes I'm going to say something really declarative that's really fucking retarded. Somebody should tell me.
Actually, that's the best way to figure it out. You just need to say like the complete opposite of what you really mean, and then see if they call you on your bullshit. Because if they don't, you're like, what the hell? Who did I hire? Right?
Well, and I think the people that have worked with me at more than one company, one of the things that I really value, of course, they're awesome, but is also that they actively disagree with me. They will come and say, you know what, that is not right, or here's another way to look at it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's something else I want to acknowledge about the three of you. And I think it's gonna be one of the most important things and one of the biggest themes about work going forward, is the three of you are human beings at work. And all three of you have been human beings with me, which opens the door for me to be a human being with you. And that doesn't mean we get to be like pussies about the result, but at the same time, getting to know you guys as human beings, and it's funny. We have this weird thing in our culture that we're like a professional at work and we're ourselves at home. And that if we wall ourselves up at work and it's not personal, it's business and all that shit, that's sort of the way it should be, like from the fucking 40s and 50s. And there's an interesting opposite to that each of you have helped me learn, which is the more human we are with each other, the better it is, whatever the context, work or not work. And so I guess with that said, A, what are your thoughts about that? And B, do you think that's something that's starting to permeate in the work world, in your world?
Yes. I mean, I'll start with this. So I'm a person that in all aspects of my life, I'm a very transparent, open person. I probably share more. I'm an emotionally driven person. And it's why I'm great at what I do. Right. But it's also been part of my character. Right. And that people feel connected to me. And it's why I've been successful, is that I can connect to people and they want to work with me and they like me, and I can, not in a manipulative way, but I can get them to do things. Right. I think you get to a certain point in your career, whether someone maybe used that against you and turned it into a negative, or you get to a point in your career where you feel like you can't be that open anymore because you have to have, you have to be the executive. And at least in my world, in my experience, when I've kind of put that wall up, it's never served me well. And, I kind of went from maybe being too transparent to not transparent enough. And now I'm finally kind of figuring out that happy medium of being someone that is a human being that people can relate to. Going back to what you said earlier, being warm, but still being respected and competent. I think sometimes people feel to your point, you have to be one or the other, because when you're too human, that's a weakness. And I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and. But I think for, at least in my experience, it's been a journey to kind of figure out how to get that balance between the two.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about being a puss.
No.
Right? And there's nobody in this room who is. So that's not what this is at all. So I think we have to hold each other to account to produce legendary results, right? And all of us, when we work together, and all of us subsequent to that, have been mofos about going out and producing legendary results. I mean, look at what all of you have done. So it's not I think that was the theory in the past, was that if we're in a relationship that's not, quote, professional, whatever the fuck that was supposed to mean, then the fact that I give a shit about Janet as a human being, and the fact that I've met your kids and your husband, and I have a sense of your life and all that stuff, means that I'm going to make a bad business decision, right? That's sort of the unspoken. And to me, that was always retarded.
Mm-hmm. That's how you build bridges with people, is by understanding them as humans, right?
Right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that wall thing is. That wall between the personal and your personal life and your professional life. I don't have it. I don't want it, actually.
No.
I get it. Especially in the whatever decades before us, it was very, split, but not unlike your work-life balance that we all call BS, right? It's funny that Janet would feel like she has to justify what time she wants to leave for her kid's soccer game or whatever. But you don't have to justify calling her at 9:00 if you need something done, right? That's the beauty, I think, of the work-life, the true work-life balance. But at the same time, that's the professional personal life. When I go into my one-on-ones, I'm having conversations with people about, what are your kids doing? How was their first week of school? I don't want to come in and just have a meeting with you about all the shit we need to get done. There's plenty of that, but I'd actually like to know, how you doing?
Yeah.
Are you okay? Are you feeling good about what you're doing? Do you feel like you're, is your passion here? All of that matters. And I think that's the environment that you have to set in an organization today, or people just won't stay. Right? They just won't. It's just, it is the whole war for talent thing is I don't want to say that is an overused phrase, but it's true. Finding that best people and keeping them and grooming that new talent that's coming out and stuff, you have to have that relationship with people. You have to. Yeah, and wouldn't you want to? You spend a lot of time with these people,
right.
A lot of time, right? Traveling, in the office, out of the office at 9:00 at night on Zoom or Slack or whatever. you kind of want to know who they are. I want to drive out of the driveway at UCSF and see Danny and know I'm going to spend Christmas Day with him. Like, not in a very good situation. That's, what is that, work or life balance? I don't know.
It's called being a person.
Right.
Yeah, and Janet, by way of example, I remember meeting your kids when they seemed like they were teeny weeny little ankle biters to me. And to have you send me an email saying, would I spend some time on the phone with your son about his career and his life? Would I come on? Of course, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know him really well, but, I've known Garrett since he was, I don't know, how old the fuck was when I met him?
Yeah, so he would have been 7, 8, 9, those years.
Yeah. And you know what I said to him towards the end of our call?
No.
I said, listen, Garrett, you can call me or email me anytime because I want you to know something. I think your mom's awesome and I love her. And that makes me your crazy uncle.
Well, that's very sweet. Well, he had a great chat with you.
I'm glad that he didn't call and go, hey, I don't need to spend any more time with my quote unquote crazy fuck uncle again. But like,
he wants to come visit you.
Yeah, well, hey, have him move in. But what I love is that we have a relationship that after all this time, when your son's kind of grappling with his future and going, being in college and doing all the things that he's doing, that you would even think you would want my sorry, uneducated ass to talk to him. and look, I look at my life, and most of the most powerful relationships in my life come from people I met at work.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yep. I think back to I have good friends from college, but I look at everyone that I met post-college that's a significant person in my life, and they've all been through work. But I think it goes back to how do you treat, if you treat your job as a job, that you go in and punch a clock. And I don't even know if that's even possible at this level anymore in this industry, but you're not thinking about your work family as your family. But when you have that approach to your work where it's just a part of your life, well, then therefore those are your people, that's your family, and you've got to find your people. And there's no way to just say, those are my work people and these are my life people. They become, your work people are your life people, right?
They are in my life.
We're getting deep here.
Yeah. Well, we're several scotches in. We've been running for a little while. So what are you guys most excited about in the future, both work-wise and with your families and your children, or your JJ in my cases are not children. Although I have a lot of children in my life. I don't know about you, but I don't know how.
Are those the chickens?
Well, yes. No, those aren't the chickens. Those are my daughters.
Oh,
so that we're clear about that. Deb?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think, I still maintain that the best companies for me are sort of the kind of companies that I'm at now, where it's growing and trying to figure itself out and, on the path to building and challenging a industry that never existed before. And it's such a like we were in mobile security. It's such a no-brainer to me that you're going to secure the thing that you do everything on now. How would security not go there? And yet we're still pushing the envelope on, I don't see a threat on this thing. Really? Wow. Putin.
And then there's that guy in North Korea who flung poo. He's coming too.
But I still really love those kinds of companies. I think it's fun. I love the Challenger brand. I just think it's kind of what I want to do. So that's my professional thing. Personally, I look at empty nesters as free birds. My friend Heidi Boleyn, literally her kids left one after the other. One went to Cornell, one went to Washington State, one in I think her daughter's a senior this year at Washington State. And when her son Mason went to Cornell, she #freebird to everything. And I'm really, really looking forward to that.
Free.
I'm telling you, I am. There's no empty nest in my house. We are going to be on the road. We were a great couple before kids. we're a good couple with kids, we're going to be a great, great couple again. So I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent.
That's great. Well, I mean, I talked about it a little. I think that, you know, similar to you, I love this industry. I think security is so fundamentally important to what we do. And, you know, I think, you know, I finally found it's like all the stars aligned in being a CMO with the magic triangle is completely in alignment at Tenable. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm right in the middle of it, which is great. And so I'm excited to see where we can take this. I think after this, it's like, you know, and hopefully that's way far in the future. But after this, I kind of thinking about like, what's the crazy, like do it, you know, never the CFO, CMO of the NFL. Like, is that like doing something crazy? Like what's my perfect, like marrying being a CMO with like what I'm really passionate about, which also might be a terrible idea. But I think about like doing something just totally like out there. So that's kind of like my, like, you know, 10-year horizon. I don't know.
You know, just as a side tangent, I recently had the opportunity to, speaking about falling in love with people, to meet Bill Walton, the NBA legend, Hall of Famer. He and I spoke for NetSuite in San Diego. And the amazing thing is, of course, he's crazy passionate about basketball, as you'd expect. But he's also a huge cyclist. And by the way, he's 12 feet tall. They have to build a custom bike for fucking Bill's ass. No, Bill is, I think he's 6'11". Like Bill's fucking tall. So he loves cycling and he loves music.
Oh, well, there's a match made.
Well, and the thing that he's done, to your point, JJ, is he's used the fact that he's NBA legend. He's considered one of the top 50 players ever in NBA history, right? To go out and meet all these people. And so he's great. He's friends with the Grateful Dead and Neil Young and all these people. Awesome. And he has all this because he loves music. And so he's gone out and met. And so, you know, JJ, how fucking legendary is it going to be the day the press release drops that says Jennifer Johnson, Chief Marketing Officer of the National Football League?
Let's just all put it out in the universe right now. What's the date? What's the day today? What's the date today? September what?
8.
September 8th, 2017 is the day that Jennifer Johnson has proclaimed that she is going to be the future CMO of the National Football League.
There
and when you play it back, when it actually happens, you're going to play it back.
We will redrop this episode of Legends and Losers.
That's right. You heard it first
so
here.
Tenable becomes giant category king, crushes everybody, and JJ becomes CMO of the NFL.
That's right. There you go. And then one other thing, and I'll hand over to Janet. I think, you know, I look at, you know, I love New York, and I love the fact that there's like this like blossoming tech scene that's happening outside of Silicon Valley. And every time I go back there, I work with different incubators and startups and do talks on things like category design. So in part of designing my own life is like, well, there's got to be another way between just like either living in San Francisco or living in New York, and or like trying to be bi-coastal. Like there has to be a different way to get my New York fix. So I thought, well, I'll just try it out and start doing more advising and councils and things like that in New York. And who knows where that might lead. And by the way, the NFL is headquartered in New York, so you never know. It's all part of the master plan.
Very Dr. Evil of you there, JJ. And Janet, what do you think about the future?
I have a less specific goal, I think, than JJ does. So, you know, I'm excited to join Palo Alto. And I think that, you know, as I look at this opportunity, you know, the Nimble ride was fantastic and rather short.
And man, may I say, Janet, to you, if I have never quite said it, you know, effectively and appropriately, fucking A, lady. Great job at Nimble Storage.
It was fun. It was really fun. And I'm looking forward to Palo Alto being a longer run where I can really kind of get deeper, you know, invest more years. How about that? You know,
yeah.
Not such a quick turn because it's a bigger, more substantial company. I love
because you're not a quick hit kind of a person, are you?
It's
No,
not really my deal.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it's security. You know, early years I grew up at SGI. I mean, our customers were like doing brain surgery and brain mapping, and you know, changing the way cars and airplanes were designed. You know, it was like changing the world. And you know, I think security has that ability to really make a big impact on the world in a very positive way. And then, of course, supporting my kids, going to gymnastics meets, you know, on the East Coast, and visiting my son and whatever that happens. But Also, there's like a Sequoia Ascent joint program on mentoring women that are early in their careers. So I'm starting to get involved in that kind of thing.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. We're trying to get a couple of Sequoia Ascent graduates on Legends and
really?
Losers.
Oh,
Yeah, I've been
fantastic.
talking to Blair Shane about that.
Yeah.
Blair was on Legends and Losers fairly early on. One of my talking about fucking legendary CMOs, unbelievable CMO. But yeah, so she's trying to help me get some of those folks on.
Right. So I think that kind of a program, where you can mentor women that are not necessarily in your company, right, that are earlier in their careers. And I love the idea of having a platform. And I have some ideas of what I'd like to do to help girls understand what they can do with a tech degree beyond just go be an engineer or a programmer. I think that there's such a narrow view, and not just for girls, but for boys as well. It's like tech, if you go in and you get an engineering degree or computer science degree, there's a view that you're going to be in a room programming. And I'd like to figure out how can we help educate people on like what the world is wide open. If you have that kind of a STEM or background, you can do a lot of different things through your career, and how to help them understand that. So that's kind of, it's like a project I'd like to have as I, of course, ramp up and get going in the new job, and then have lots of free time to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the three of you have a lot to contribute to entrepreneurship in our country and our world. As you guys know, we're witnessing the greatest destruction in American entrepreneurship in history. More companies die in America every week than are founded. And so for me personally, I'm trying to do everything I know how to do to spur entrepreneurship and to support existing entrepreneurs. Because look, it's really fucking clear. Entrepreneurs build our world. Every innovation that you and I enjoy, every product, technology, service that makes a difference was created by a legendary entrepreneur who was also a category designer, whether they knew they were doing that or not. And even more so than that, for me personally, I think you guys have so much to contribute. And what I love a lot of things about all three of you, but what I love is that desire to give back. There's that great Kevin Spacey quote where he says, if you're lucky enough to make it to the top floor, you need to send the elevator back down.
That's an awesome quote.
Isn't that fun?
It really is a great
And I'm paraphrasing a little, but it's essentially that's what he says. And, I would just tell you that A, I think all three of you are an incredible inspiration. And B, you guys have so much now because you guys got to the top of the mountain. And you may not realize it because I know you're still fighting in your, category battles and your career growth and your personal growth and all that. But I just want to tell you, you guys are at the top of the mountain. You guys are leaders in Silicon Valley, and you have an amazing opportunity to give back.
Thank you.
So ladies, is there anything else before we wrap?
Well, this has been fabulous. I just like to say it's been great to see all of you and spend some time with you guys. I was really looking forward to today. And
what are you doing next Friday?
I think we should do this every Friday, Deb. What do you think? This is a new mini series. 437 weeks every Friday.
It's just cool to see all of us doing really amazing things and just kicking ass in our own ways and being able to share it with everybody.
I think we need a Mercury reunion too. This makes me want to get everybody back together.
Wasn't there one a while ago?
There was.
I don't know.
I went to one.
You did?
Yeah.
How was it?
We just have to have a better distribution list. I don't know. It was fun. It was fun. It was good to see everybody. There's just lots of people, really great people. I mean, that's the thing. You look around the room, it's like, there are just lots of people you just like. It's it's so nice to see them.
Yeah. Well, listen, ladies, here's what I want to say in completion. I want you to know I fucking love you guys.
I love you,
We
Chris.
love you too. Mwah.
And I want you to know, and I don't mean this in a corny way, I want you to know how proud I am of you and how inspired I am by you. And I'm so glad you're my friends.
Oh,
That was very sweet.
So nice.
thank you.
Yeah. Well, we had a great group, and it's nice that we can get back together and stay in touch, and you can help my son or whatever, life goes on, right? We stay in touch and life keeps changing and we see each other. It was great to see Carrie today too.
Right.
Yeah.
We're on this magical mystery tour together. Yeah.
It's fucking awesome. That was my third F-bomb. I'm done. And drop the mic.
Note, I think we should drop the mic. Wow, 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 wow. Well, I hope you had as much fun enjoying that, experiencing that, watching that, listening to that as I did participating in it. Three incredible women who I am so glad are in my life. If you love this episode as much as I did, why not share it with your closest 5,000 friends right now? And after you do that, I just say thank you, and I love you a little bit extra for it. So share the shit out of this episode, please. Couple shout outs. I want to make sure I acknowledge Sunny Kumar for his legendary LinkedIn recommendation, Amazon review of Play Bigger, and iTunes review of what the hell's the name of the show again? Legends and Losers. Also want to shout out to Bob O'Brien. Bob has been with us pretty much from the very beginning, and he's been a huge supporter. And I just want to say thank you, Bob. Your continued Twitter support and LinkedIn and all of it, it's outstanding. Also a huge shout out, and as we say en français, chapeau, to Jordan Harbinger, AJ Harbinger, Jason De Filippo, and the entire crew at the incredible podcast, The Art of Charm. You may know, you're probably a subscriber. The Art of Charm is one of the biggest podcasts out there. And they were kind enough to have me on as a guest recently. And I'm not sure when the episode's dropping, but hopefully pretty soon. And also want to shout out to Scott Lowry for his most legendary Thanksgiving post about our show and some of the things that he's been learning and enjoying in our Legends and Losers Facebook group, which we would also love it if you join if you like. All right. We would like to thank Equity Directory, the invite-only network of entrepreneurs and startup talent exchanging work for equity at equitydirectory.co. HarperCollins Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Hey, this book makes a wonderful holiday gift for every business relationship in your life. So pick up 5,000 copies wherever you pick up legendary books. OneLifeFullyLive.org, dream, plan, and live your best life. Check us out. We're the nonprofit at OneLifeFullyLive.org, making a difference to thousands. Spiro, the sales app for salespeople who like to make money. Check us out at Spiro.ai. Positive marketing, PR, marketing, and you guessed it, category design in London, Europe, and beyond. NetSuite, #1 in cloud ERP. Check us out at netsuite.com. Tenable Network Security. Technology is a dangerous sport. Protect yourself at tenable.com. Palo Alto Networks, the next generation of enterprise security platform at paloaltonetworks.com. And for mobile security, Lookout Mobile Security at lookout.com. 1-800-CEO-READ. If you're going to pick up many copies of Play Bigger for the holidays, why not check out 1-800-CEO-READ. And pursuingresults.com. They produce legendary podcasts, and this one too. Interview Valet, podcast interview marketing. If you're a thought leader, get your leading thoughts on some podcasts at interviewvalet.com. We'd like to remind you that today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes, and this oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would love you just a little bit extra if you shared the shit out of it, and we can feel you sharing the show. We really appreciate it. All rights do remain disturbed. Legends and Losers is not recommended for wankers. This oddcast is highly flammable. We recommend that you be nice to your mother. Tell 2 people you love about 2 podcasts you love. Don't be lame. Get out of the passing lane. Listen to Tom Waits. Keep your hands up and your chin down. Support your local CMO. Teach girls math and science. Watch This Is Spinal Tap. And hey, Colin, doesn't this oddcast really tie the room together? Today, our deepest apologies go out to Nick Halstead, CEO of InfoSum. Sorry, Nikki, we just ran out of time for you. That's it. Be legendary, my friends, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.